Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Sorry about this, folks. It's now 6:02 for the 15th of May, 2019. And Mr. Snyder.
We have some third graders from Bakey that are going to help us with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you guys want to start.
Go ahead, start whenever you're ready.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
I think Mr. Snyder wanted to say something.
Thank you. If you all want to have a seat, that's great. I just wanted to let you know we invited some of our third graders. About a week and a half ago, we had a wax museum special event at Bakey School where all of our third grade students dressed in character as someone who they had researched. And we had a wax museum that was set up there. So we had some of our participants come, so they're in their costume and in their character. So they are here tonight. Many of them have things they've got to run off to, but they took some special time to be here. It was a great event. The Commissioner of Education, Mr. Edelblue, was at school that day, was able to participate, was very impressed with that. So we have some of our third grade girls here to represent us. So maybe you can tell us who you're dressed up as. I am
Cleopatra, Amelia Earhart, Carrie Stroud, Harriet Tubman, Princess Diana, Harriet Tubman.
All right. So this is a small representation of our third grade.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Phyllis. Tammy's going to do graduation. Okay. Tammy's gonna.
Okay, great.
All right. I will be there Monday night about 6:30. For those who don't know, the awards night is Monday night. If anybody wants to come, I will be there representing us. Okay. How about a motion on the minutes?
Yeah.
Move to approve. Second.
Peter.
Any discussion on the minutes?
I'm sorry.
Jamie is excused tonight. He's on vacation. Nothing matters, but he's on vacation. Manifest should be working its way
Didn't
around.
take the vote in the minutes.
Need a vote on the minutes, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I did that. My mistake. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Oh.
That's
Abstention.
unanimous. One abstain. She was.
I have are you talking about, did you bring the minutes up yet? I didn't hear you.
I know you were talking to Larry. I saw you. I was going to give you a detention, but that's
Oh,
okay.
I'm bad
Yes,
at
we
that.
did. Do you have anything?
Yeah, just a simple thing. Where it's 4.4 finance, Mr. Baker reported that the group will meet on April 17th. It should be met on April 17th. Yeah. No, I checked it. Yeah. Yeah, it's no big deal. Thank you. Yeah.
We can still stand, I think, with the vote. Okay. Want to welcome Ellie back from the South Pacific,
Thank you very much.
from New Zealand, Australia.
Australia, New Zealand, Tahiti, Moaires, Bora Bora, and Honolulu. It's a hell of a trip.
And we have no nominations. Did everybody get the manifest all set?
Yep.
Okay, a couple of resignations, sir.
Yeah, we have one resignation, Catherine Glennon. She's a grade 2 teacher at Bakey.
Motion to accept.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? This is good. I don't have to look at you to see if you've got the. I like this. Okay. Superintendent's report.
I just wanted to quickly, I'll be doing a presentation later, but I did want to mention that 2 weeks ago on Friday, Commissioner Edelblue visited the district. We spent about an hour at each school. He got to meet the middle school student council. He toured the Bakey Wax Museum, and we spent about an hour talking with students about their extended learning opportunities. And there were some amazing extended learning opportunities that the board has not seen yet, which I would probably like to have you see. And then there was also some time at the memorial school, we actually went to some classrooms and sat with the children and did some reading and writing workshops. It was a blast. So I have to say that I just wanted to mention that, our commissioner did not come from the field of education, but he has spent 1 to 2 or 3 days a week in a public school for the entire time he's been in office. And he really was exceptionally good at connecting with the children. He really talked to the kids and listened to them and worked with them. It was really amazing. And he also spent an hour and a half with our parent group that sometimes we have breakfast on Fridays. So he spent some time talking to parents as well. And I thought it was really great. The parents really appreciated having the opportunity. And he also mentioned that schools don't usually invite a group of parents in to meet the commissioner. And that was really cool. So he liked that. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Committee reports, policy.
Our next meeting is Wednesday, the 29th, from 4 to 5 p.m. in the SIU conference room at the high school. May 29th, 4 p.m.
Okay. 4 to 5.
Yep.
Finance.
Finance met on May 8th. The committee members present were Jamie Fitzpatrick, Jim Baker, plus Matt Angel. The minutes from our April 17th meeting were reviewed and approved. We reviewed bids from independent auditing firms to perform the school district's annual audit. All the firms sent bid requests that were sent bid requests were similarly qualified. The contract went to Vaughn, Cloquet and Company, which is our current firm. They submitted the lowest cost bid for an average savings of $3,970 a year over the next 5 years. We reviewed the trust and revolving fund balances as of March 31st, 2019. The special ed trust fund balance was $232,119.06. The capital improvements fund balance was $156,207.41. The facilities use fund balance was $238,715.89. We reviewed various revenue and expense reports, including current budget reports. Total expenditures for health and dental through May 6th were $3,485,649.05. These are for the year. The expenditures for the general fund, excluding health and dental through May 6th, were $21,940,730.64. And the next Finance Committee meeting is June 12th at 3:45 p.m.
Personnel.
Our meeting for the 22nd of May has been moved to June 26th, a Wednesday, 5 p.m., and that'll be posted on the calendar.
Wait a minute, I'm confused. You say that's a Wednesday?
June 26th,
Oh, June. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I put down May.
and the 22nd, May 22nd, has been canceled for next week.
Okay, I believe that's all. Adam, how you doing way down there?
I'm doing good.
How many days, Adam?
I have 12 more school days and about 25 until graduation.
25.
But I mean, who's counting?
That includes senior skip day, which is not sanctioned by the school board, by the way.
No, there's no senior skip day.
Oh,
what are you
okay.
talking about?
Yes,
It's
because
called a mystery
I've
day.
never seen anything
It
in
is.
policy about it, so I'm sure there isn't.
Oh no, I'm sure. I just think we're all planning on being sick one day.
Oh, okay.
So the freshman class is holding a pencil fundraiser, and they are planning a step-up dance for the 8th graders. The sophomore class had their pizza fest, and they made close to $1,000. Yeah, that was pretty good. They're starting their prom committee meetings as well. The junior class has prom on this Saturday, and they had a Chipotle fundraiser this past weekend. The senior class is planning the senior cruise, the trip to Mel's Funway, and the senior gift, which I'm almost positive we're going to be doing a scholarship. The class of 2013 scholarship just ran out this year, so we're going to take that spot, I think, and have a class of 2019 scholarship. And of course, we're getting ready for graduation. So the student council worked on the handbook. So as the year comes to an end, we decided to look at our handbook and see how we can make it better. There was a lot of great points, and there's going to be a few small changements, nothing too big, but a big thing that came up was the enforcement of the rules. So that's going to play a big role next year. And then the elections. There's a lot of people running this year. Some new faces, some old, but the council is trying to find a way to get new people more involved before they run. So any random person who's just running to make their applicant or their resume look better, at least has some experience. And the elections are going to be held next week and the week after, I believe. That's all I got.
That's it, thank you. First public comment. Raise your chance, okay. Now, Pam, you've got quite a bit. Okay, policies. You might want to check your agendas, ladies and gentlemen. Some of these are second read.
Policies will not be projected on the screen tonight. Does everybody have access to it in their folder? Their Google Docs folder in case they want to reference something?
Yep.
I'll read my motion first. I move that we approve new policy DAF, including subsections DAF 1 through 10, and JIHB and JIHD. Repeal old policies 8JH-R, JH-R1, and JK-R. Reaffirm policy JLC-R1. Reclassify, recode policy JLCJ, and approve as revised BEDB, DFA, DFF, EBBC, JH, JICB, JICDA, JICFA, JICJ, JRE, JIH, JIH-R with first and second to read. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Now, I have some notes for each policy, and if you have any
Discuss through with
questions.
those? No, okay.
Yes.
I was just saying, any discussion?
I'm just letting you know I can make comments if you have any.
This isn't in any kind of order, but JICJ, cell phones and electronic devices.
Right.
It says, use of mobile phones and other electronic devices in school can both benefit and distract from the educational environment. Principals at each school should determine and inform staff and students of the expectations for appropriate use of electronic devices. The previous policy said student use of electronic communication devices is strictly prohibited during instructional time. Such devices are to be turned off and put away out of sight. I was thinking that it might be good to include part of that sentence that was struck out so that after it says principals at each school shall determine and inform staff and students of the expectations for appropriate use of electronic devices. And then otherwise, student use of electronic communication devices is strictly prohibited during instructional time. So that it's not a matter of you can do it unless you're told not to. It's a matter of you can't do it unless you're told you can.
Mr. Dawson, would you like to talk about that, or would you like me to respond?
If I can respond to the former person upstairs. You're constantly fighting battles if you don't have something like the new change. It's awful. The kids have got them secreted, the kids are doing, and I will tell you, you're fighting so many battles that you get tired before the kids do. You've got 20 kids in a classroom, 5 classrooms a day, and every day there'll be 3 or 4 or 5 kids, but there'll be a different 3 or 4 or 5 kids. So you're fighting the battle every day. You've got a discipline problem. I was under the system where take them and put them away. I like the idea that we're going to leave it up to them to decide, and they're going to enforce it.
Yeah, and this doesn't change that.
But I see what you're saying, because, but I got to tell you, I know you could say, well, that's not right, but in practical experience, in practical classroom management, It is horrendous if you make a hard, fast rule. And then what do you start doing? Down to the assistant principal, causing problems. It's really, in practicality, I don't think it's worth it. I think it's better to let the people decide that are in the classrooms how they want to handle the situation.
And that's what the policy says.
Well, no, I believe the policy was strictly prohibited.
The original policy.
Right.
And now it's saying that cell phones can be used with permissions of the principals.
That's what I agree with.
I agree with that too.
Oh, maybe I'm confused about what you were saying.
I think you are. But only with approval of the principals is what I'm saying.
I think that's, okay, all right.
That's what
I've said what I said.
The last sentence states that no student has a right to possess or use a mobile device at any time during the school day other than as prescribed above.
Yeah, that's not what I'm just talking about adding one sentence to the paragraph that says the use of mobile phones and other electronic devices in school can both benefit and distract from the educational environment. Principals at each school shall determine and inform staff and students of the expectations for appropriate use of electronic devices. Otherwise, student use of electronic communications devices is strictly prohibited during instructional time. So if they don't have permission, they can't use it.
Would you like me to chime in now, or? No. Yep. I went back and forth with the admins about this policy, and the reality is that the student handbooks need to be adaptable over time based on need, and the policy should kind of set a guideline. So what the policy is saying is the principals set the parameters for when it is appropriate and not appropriate to use cell phones. And my assumption, and the way I expect the administration to work, is that they would do that in collaboration with staff, right? Because they're in the classrooms day to day with the kids with the cell phones. So I know that a lot of time went into this, and I'm not contesting your point, Mr. Baker. I actually can see the validity of adding that language. I'm not sure, I'm kind of looking at Bob and Dawson, who helped us write this, and he's thinking that I'd like him to come to the mic and to share, because I think he was kind of feeling like it's better as written just because of the flexibility, but I'd like to hear his thoughts because he deals with this every day.
I have a couple of thoughts. Like, I need a microphone. Excuse me. I think we have to remember a couple of things. The policy applies not just to the high school, it applies to the elementary schools and the middle school as well. There are elementary school students that are coming to school now with mobile devices. Some of them are on their wrist, they're wearing them permanently. They're making a device now that where a parent can listen in continuously to a student at any time they want, at all times. And schools are dealing with that issue where parents are listening into student lessons. It's changing every day, like Tom said. The intent of the language here is to allow each principal in each school every year to establish, here's where the line's gonna be, here's where the expectations are gonna be. My first year here, we had the typical problems with cell phones in classrooms. Kids were doing, as they will. They're gonna sneak around. It's a great communication device. Parents are texting kids during the day. That's 1% of the 99% they're texting each other and snapping and TikToking and come up with something else. And then you've got an Apple Watch on. What we did here at the high school was say, you should establish for your classroom as a general rule, here's the permanent expectation for this room. Never, ever, ever put them in your bag, put it away. It's okay to have it out every day and use it, or what happens in most classes, I think Adam would tell you, is in between. Most teachers have red light, green light, or yellow light up on the board, and during the day they establish at the beginning of the lesson, today, your phones need to be in your bags. In 15 minutes, we're gonna do a Kahoot exercise. It's a little bit faster and easier for a lot of kids, just pull their phone out and do it on there because they can do magic with their thumbs on those things. So you just sort of determine as you go during the day what you're gonna use. That has actually helped our issue with mobile phones significantly at the high school. I can't speak for the other schools, but I know from the high school, by having the flexibility for us to say to the teaching staff, establish every single day what the mobile phone device expectations are going to be for this lesson today. The kids have found more clarity in it. The teachers have found a lot more flexibility and clarity, and we have had a zillion fewer problems. What we also told them was, if your cell phone gets sent to the office, it's spending the rest of the day in the office, and your parents are going to be contacted. I think we've had 3 phones hit the office all year, which is great. It's been much, much less of a distraction by giving us the flexibility and us adapting the rules to what we have now. 2 years from now, we could be dealing with an explosion in wearables. We could be dealing with, AirPods that you can't even see in the kids' ears. We have to be able to adapt and not have to keep coming back. Y'all, that's at least my opinion.
So I'm not asking you guys to impose something on you that you don't think you need. I'm looking, at studies that have done on smartphone usage, iPads, all of that. And one of the greatest causes of depression in teens is too much screen time. I mean, it's well documented. Books have been written about it. So all I'm saying is I was suggesting if you put that sentence in there, and I'm totally up to, going with what you guys want to do, if that makes it, there's no question about it. If you haven't gotten permission in your classroom, then you don't use your phone. If you've gotten permission in your classroom, then you use your phone.
My concern there would be, I believe you'd be setting up teachers a little bit to, in effect, violate that policy continuously as they're dealing with the lessons that they have in the day. They might not say, I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head here a little bit. What you're basically asking teachers to do is every time they're going to use the devices to do that, where in some classrooms it's going to be more of an expectation. Let's say you're dealing with a writing workshop in a classroom, kids are typing away, they'd be listening to music, they're using an electronic device.
If you don't want it, I'll withdraw my suggestion. I think it would be actually make it simpler rather than harder, but you're the guy in the room.
Yeah, we've actually asked teachers to do a similar thing.
Okay.
But instead of saying the defined default, the default is no. We've said the default is whatever the teacher defines at the beginning of the class, and please define it every day. Now, there are some teachers, it's an automatic no. I can think of one in particular, in the bag all the time, forget it. Others are much more liberal with their use, and I think across the board it's working very well.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, withdraw it. Yeah. I've got one other, unless somebody else has something. This is a question. I see that policy JKR, which deals with expulsion, is being replaced by, in quotes, content covered by JICD. And I looked up JICD. And I just want to ask, is the revision of JICD that's in the online handbook, June 6, 2018, is that the most recent version? It's June 6, 2018, because it refers to, has been updated recently.
That is the most recent date I
Okay.
have.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
That was last June to cover this year.
Yeah, thank you.
Seems like yesterday.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so what are your wishes?
Any other comments or questions about these policies? I've got a lot of notes here I can go over.
No.
Do you have any questions? Okay, so again, the Ds are required by federal law, and the Js, we discussed it extensively at our policy meeting, and we agreed with the recommended revisions for the J policies.
Want a motion?
We have a motion. So call the question?
So who made the motion to accept? Who, I'm sorry.
I moved, I think Tammy seconded.
Tammy, okay, I just didn't know if, did you get that? I didn't think there had been a motion either, no.
I thought there was a motion on the floor already in a second.
made the motion.
You seconded,
Okay.
I think Larry did too.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
It's fine.
okay, all right. Just want to make sure we don't muck up something. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Mr. Broder, could I say one thing?
I hope so, because we've got 33 minutes, no,
No.
18 minutes to.
Get your pace up.
I just wanted to take a moment to publicly recognize really two people that have worked really, really hard on these policies, actually three. Mr. Dawson has taken on the daunting task. I asked Mr. Dawson, could you take these notes from the NHSBA and pop them in the policy and get them ready for policy committee? And in my lingo, that's, go through each one, put in the new language, and then bring it to the policy committee. In Bob's schema, it's create a whole new system of how to redo policies, update the language, check with all the administrators, get it all ready, get it to Pam, and then get it ready for the board. So I just wanted to thank Mr. Dawson for all of his hard work on the J policies, and there'll be more coming. It is really helpful to have someone who's on the forefront of discipline actually working on discipline policy, because that makes the most sense. So that's been very helpful. Good luck for the folks when we get the I policies, which is instruction. So, but I also wanted to thank Matt Angel for working hard on the D policies. There's a lot of complicated things going on at the federal government level with regard to federal grant funds, and it's really important to recognize that those policies are incredibly complex. And lastly, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Dr. Brown for hours of looking at policies, getting everything ready. It is the most extensive, comprehensive review of policies I've ever seen a district do in 6 months. And really, Dr. Brown has truly worked a lot of hours to make sure that it's all organized and ready. I mean, just this list is more policies than some districts approve in a year. And it was all in one meeting smoothly. Everyone's been well communicated to, and everyone understands, and it's been a very smooth process, so thank you.
And Mrs. Kennedy also.
Oh yes, and Phyllis too, who's been posting everything, and yeah, always. I did want to mention, Chair, that we could go to, if the board would be willing to, we could do item 8.2 and get that wrapped up before our public forum.
Before I do that, I would like to know, who is Matt Engel?
Oh, Matt Angel.
Angel.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Matt is currently serving as our office manager, but he will be joining us as our business administrator July 1st. Welcome aboard, Mr. Angel.
Been with us about a month?
A month, yep.
Okay, would you say 8.2?
Yeah, if we could do 8.2, it'd be nice to
Sure.
do that. We could do 8.3 as well.
Well, let's see how far we go with 8.2.
Okay.
That is you.
8.2, I'd like to invite Dr. Haynes up to the mic to explain this so that she gets all the details.
Good evening. This goes right along with policy D that were just reapproved. The federal assurances are for the federal grants that we receive as a public school organization. We receive a bunch of federal grants, including Title I, Title II, part of Title III, Title IV, IDEA, which covers our special education students. And starting this year, it is a requirement for us to make sure that the board is aware that we sign these general assurances. And the general assurances, several pages thick, basically state the same things that are stated in policy D, making sure that when we say we're going to be receiving funds from the federal government for a certain purpose, and we explain what that purpose is going to be and how much we're going to expend for that purpose, that we're actually going to follow through and do that and use those federal funds appropriately in the appropriate places. So this is just us presenting these assurances, and the superintendent needs to sign these in order for us to receive those funds from the federal government. So that is the general assurances.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. And I will be signing these right now and giving them back to Phyllis because I don't love pieces of paper. They tend to disappear. So if we could talk about the next one.
I'll let you sign that first.
Yep. There's a lot to sign here, so we can keep going. Okay, thank you very much.
Can I have a motion to go 8.3, dates for June board meetings?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, I did want to propose to the board, I am requesting that the school board meet, where our typical meeting schedule would be that we would meet June 5th and June 19th if needed. I'm asking that we meet June 5th and June 12th, so that if the board deliberates and comes to a consensus or a conclusion regarding the reorganization of the district at one of those two meetings, that I would then have time with staff to talk about said changes.
Because the last day for teachers is, I think, the 15th, 16th?
Yeah, the students leave the 13th.
Right.
So then we would have the 14th, 17th, and 18th with staff to talk. And I would like that because the students won't be here. 3 days is a good amount of time.
Any, okay, I guess we could use a motion on that to move our dates in June to the 5th and the 12th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. I think the superintendent just explained it. Any discussion?
Just a question. So would those be the only 2 meetings in June, or would we still make the third one too?
Those would probably be the only meetings unless we needed another meeting.
Often the 19th is an optional one anyway, so.
I'd like to maintain the 19th as a scheduled meeting for policies.
Why don't we see how it goes the 5th? I mean, it's a month away.
We can always have a meeting. It's fine.
We can always have a meeting.
Okay.
So rather than put it in concrete now.
But I
have a
would like to
policy.
have that reserved if needed, so.
Right, okay, yeah, that's how it usually is if needed.
Okay.
So, you know. Okay,
We need a vote though to move the.
yeah, right, okay, we just covered discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Larry, is that a,
No,
no,
I can't make that date.
oh, can't make what dates?
The 12th.
Well, that's all right.
Sign up.
Jeremy can't make it tonight.
I know. So, yes, I'll vote for it,
Okay, thanks.
Okay, all right.
just so you know that I.
And I'm going on vacation just after that, but I don't think we have meetings, so. Okay, so the 5th and 12th, am I correct? And that was approved? Okay, and we still have 12 minutes.
Could we consider having the second public comment? Because probably the majority of public comment will occur during the hearing.
I think you should wait till after
Okay.
the forum to have the second.
All right, thank you.
All
Yeah,
right.
we could just take a 5-minute break.
Well,
Minute break.
hold on one
About the next
second.
meeting agenda.
Because we don't really have anything after, let's go with the next meeting agenda, because I don't think we have anything. So that way I can check it off. It'll be something I don't have to mention. Okay? And the only announcements are the school board, the meetings, but there is a meeting with Fremont that I have to, make sure more people hear it. All right. And this is going to take a few minutes, so why don't we take a few moments and go to the men's and ladies' room, because we may be in here for an hour or so, a little longer. Okay. Okay, we're going to start about 2 minutes early because Superintendent Ambrose has a few things to say as to the decorum and things of that nature, so if we can start now.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm really glad to see some folks here this evening. Thank you to everyone who showed up. Sorry, I'm waiting for Chair Broderick to stop shuffling his papers into his microphone. All right, is that better? Okay, great. I will continue to invite people to come sit closer to the front, but it's up to you. I know that adults and high school juniors and seniors alike will congregate toward the back, and kindergarten kids will run right to the front and want to be in the front row, so I understand. But it's nice to have everyone sitting nearby so that folks can talk and engage in this important conversation. So I just wanted to give you all an update about what I've been doing for the last 4 weeks. In essence, I've spent the majority of every day either answering questions in the 450 questions that were submitted through the 2 different surveys. There was a survey about the proposal to move the middle school, grade 7 and 8, to the high school, and keep the 6th grade at each elementary school. And then there was a survey about the proposal about potentially reorganizing the elementary schools. We did receive over 450 questions, and we tried to answer every one that we could. It's important for everyone to recognize that there are 3 phases to this kind of process. We are currently in what's called the feasibility phase. We're trying to figure out where things could go, what will work, and what will happen. Is it feasible? The next phase is the planning phase, and a lot of questions were kind of going into the planning phase and not wanting to know the finer details about when will my kid get picked up on the bus, when will they get dropped off, what will the start times be. That all happens over the next 9 to 12 months, should the board choose to make a decision to reorganize the district. And then there's an implementation phase, which is where you start actually moving people into the buildings and actually start doing the work of figuring out the finer details, because we don't manufacture cars, we deal with people, and we have to go carefully and think about each change and get a lot of input. I met with 3 different groups of teachers today at the high school, and I learned 3 things that we'll have to look at when we go to that last phase of implementation. So it's constantly talking to people, revising, thinking, talking, revising, and listening that has been going on in my life. And I did want to mention that, I've met with all of the middle school students, grades 6, 7, and 8, and I also met with the middle school student council and listened to them about their questions and concerns. And they were adorable, because I went in thinking, how are we going to keep the high school students from bothering the middle school students if the middle school students were in the high school facility? I just want to assure you all that is not what the middle school students are concerned about. They want to know how they can hang out with the high school kids. I have a middle school son, and that surprised me a little bit, and I'm glad middle school's over for me tomorrow, or next month. He's going to finish 8th grade next month. So middle school's tough, and it's really important that we keep looking at it through the students' perspective, and they were mostly wondering how they could hang out with high school kids. So that was an interesting perspective. So I wanted to take a few moments to talk with you about why. So that when I reviewed the 450 questions and developed the FAQ that went out, I really felt like there was one overarching theme or a whole in this conversation, which is why. Why is this happening? Is it just money? What does it do for kids? What's going on? Can we trust everyone that if we do this, that the intervention programs will be funded? And Bob's pointing at me and talking to Sandy, and I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. Is my tie crooked? Okay, thank you. So I think it's really important to talk about why. There are a number of reasons why, but I want to talk about the most important reason why. When I was hired here, I spent the better part of 9 months meeting with people for an hour at a time. I met with every single teacher, paraprofessional, administrator, everybody in the district that I could meet with in either small groups or individually. I met with parents, school board members, the BudCom, and one huge question came out. Why is our cost per pupil so high? And why is it that our academic scores aren't as high as places that are paying less per student? Another question that came out was, I know what my kids can do, and I know what they can't do. This is the teacher side. And I need support to get them where they need to be. That came up a lot. But the other part that came through that I think we don't spend enough time talking about is how incredible our teachers are. We have some of the most amazing teachers I've ever worked with. They have set up programs to help our students succeed with very limited resources. Bakey School has 350 students. They have 1 paraprofessional dedicated to math and 1 paraprofessional dedicated to reading. And they have a reading teacher who spends a lot of their time in special education and can also work occasionally with regular ed students. And I want to be clear that the same exists at Memorial, so they've created structures to try to help the students succeed. And as a result of that work, they've been able to do incredible work with very limited resources. My point at the end of my entry plan and hundreds of hours of interviews was simple. The teachers need a successful and well-funded intervention program to help students succeed. And I want everyone here to know that that is what I need to help your children be successful. We need to have an intervention program that meets their needs. And the question before the school board and the community is, how do we pay for that? Because it's going to cost about $1.4 million per year to fund the amount of staff that we would need to have a successful intervention program. So let me talk about that a little bit, and then I'll summarize. So these are some strengths. I'm so sorry, I don't like those. We have amazing teachers, paraprofessionals, and staff. They do an incredible job. The PLC structure, which is professional learning communities, is one of the strongest I've seen at any place I've worked. The district has won awards for our professional learning communities. Teachers come together sometimes more than once a week to talk about students, what they know and can do, and what they need to do to make them stronger. And then they make plans to do something about it. It's incredible. We have clearly defined standards for student learning. And that really lends itself to the idea of proficiency-based education, the idea that you can't just sit in class and be compliant and get a B or a C. You have to actually know the material to move forward. And that is something that we continue to strive for. That is a very lofty standard. We have incredible assessment skills for academics. This district has utilized very limited PD funds for a number of years to access professional development opportunities for teachers and staff to figure out what do our kids know and what do they need to know and how do we get them there. I have not met a teacher yet that if I said a student's name and where they're at, they'll tell me exactly what's going on with that child. We've worked so hard on real life application of learning, competency-based education. It's incredible. And my favorite part is the relationships between our staff and the students and families. I've never seen anything like it. We do have areas to improve upon because we all have things to improve upon. We need to work on our academic performance on some standardized tests. And I want to be clear, I'm not a fan of the SAT. The SAT was not designed to assess a school's performance. It was designed to put people in 3 buckets. You go to college, you go to the trade school, or you go to the world of work. And the SAT does that really well. I've never been a fan of our federal government saying to us that if you have more students passing the SAT that you're doing better as a school. That's not what that test was designed for. And frankly, if you really wanted to take the best test that could help you, you'd take the military ASVAB, because that's a really accurate indicator of what your skills are. So we got a few things backwards there, but there are some other academic assessments that are really important that I'm going to talk about tonight. I really feel that we need to revamp our report cards. I've heard consistently from parents over and over again, I don't understand this report card. Could I just get a quick poll while I have everyone? How many people feel like the report card's kind of confusing? Can you just give me a thumbs up? Okay. So how many people feel like it's great and you love it? Okay, good. That's good to know. So we'll be doing some focus groups on that, and we'd love you to show up and talk about it. We've also been talking about the fact that we have clear expectations for each grade level in terms of what we expect the kids to know and do, but we don't have clearly defined units. And so we're working on 6 to 8 week units. That will be a big project. And we also want to take our PLC structure that's so strong and data rich and really get right down to what am I going to do each day instructionally for the kids. So we have an incredible PLC structure, but we want to take it to the next level. Last year, the school board adopted a definition of student success that really recognized all of the different components that go into a modern student graduating. We did base it on the state of New Hampshire's application for the ESSA law. The state has to fulfill this huge application to basically say that we'll receive federal funding. What I liked about the state's application was that they looked at multiple criteria instead of just one test score for success or failure. There's a long list on the next slide, but I'll just summarize and you can read it later. The essence of it is that without even shooting for this goal, 72% of our students met the goal. At this point, our guidance department is projecting close to 90% of our students meeting the goal this year. That's lofty, but they wanted me to say that, so I'm saying it, and we'll see when the data finally comes in. But it's really important to recognize that we as a community have agreed to notice that students can grow and learn and be prepared for the world of work in different ways. A couple of the things on here that I love is that if you earn a career and technical education industry recognized credential, that's one of the items in our criteria. Another one is scoring at least a level 3 on components of the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, the ASVAB that I talked about earlier. Acceptance into a accredited post-secondary institute, and also taking college classes count toward being a successful Sanborn graduate. If you notice, out of nine criteria, the SAT is only one of them. And it's really kind of there because the state says you have to. All right, so I'm going to keep going. You can read these, and there's all kinds of information on the website. But I do want to talk about some recent student performance data that kind of gave me some heartburn when I was hired. So I just wanted to explain how these grids work. The blue sections are the percentage of students who are meeting the expectation. The red section is the percentage of students who are not. So, for example, in grade 6, 74% of our students taking the NWEA reading assessment were met or exceeded the target. 26% did not meet or partially met the target. All of these slides will be on the web for you too, right after tonight. So let's take a look at some of this data. Oh, I also made a very nifty, what I like to call the Mr. Swayze key. Mr. Swayze is a former BudCom member who did not like acronyms, so sorry, that was supposed to be a little bit of a dry joke. I just know that acronyms kind of are everywhere in our business and they're confusing, so I gave you every acronym in order on the next page just so that you could refer to it. It is important to note that the NWEA is a standardized test to measure reading and math, the second item. That is a very, very deeply normed test that has been taken by millions of students. And what's great about that test is that when you take it, if you answer a question wrong, it's called dynamic testing. It gets easier. And then if you get that question right, it gets harder again. And it gets harder until you get one wrong, and then it gets easier again so that it can try to hone right in on your level in reading and math. It's a really solid test. I really value that data. And one of our goals in our PLCs is to provide professional development for staff to further use that data to make instructional decisions. So I do want to say one thing about the kindergarten F&P score. We give that test early. I really feel that it should be given in mid to the end of January, and we give it in November. And for kindergarten kids, the difference between November and January feels like a long, long time. So we really are having a conversation about that, and it's important to note that these benchmarks that are being reported are from the fall or the latest data point. It'll be really important for us to look at 3 criteria when we reassess this data at the end of the year. The first criteria is called annual growth. When I'm evaluating teaching or leadership, the first thing I ask is, where did the students start and where did they end up at the end of the year? That is a very important thing to consider, and many of our students make a year's growth, which shows that our teachers are fantastic. Catch-up growth is if you're a year behind, and catch-up growth means that you have to take 1.5 years for 2 years to catch up 1 year. So in other words, in year 1, you have to make 1.5 years growth. In year 2, you have to make 1.5 years growth so that you can catch up for being behind 1 year. If we don't have intervention staff, that is really hard to do. So it's really important to note that there's annual growth and then there's benchmarking. Benchmarking is what this data reports. And benchmarking says this is what the expectation was at this point in the year, and this is what where the students are at. But I do want to be clear that I shared these data points for kindergarten to be transparent because they're in our data set, but I really have a problem with their accuracy because I really am concerned that they were done about 2.5 months before it would really be effective for a lot of kindergarten students. Most kindergarten students end up at a B or a C by the end of kindergarten, which is totally fine on grade level. In first grade, 53% of our students did not meet or partially met, and 47% met on the Fontes and Pinnell, which is an internal reading assessment that our teachers administer. In second grade, we had 31% on the F&P that met, and 69 that met, and 31% that did not meet. On the NWEA ELA, we had 58% that met and 42% that did not. Now, being 10% apart is not a huge gap. A lot of times in a district, what you'll see is that the Fontes and Pinnell scores on the left are much higher than the NWEA scores. What this tells me is that our teachers are doing a really good job of accurately reporting when they do an assessment where their kids are at, which further strengthens my point that the teachers know their kids. They're doing a really great job with assessment. And what teachers are saying to me is, I know what my kid needs. We used to have support for kids when they struggled like this before special education referral. We don't have that anymore. And I could see it in the first 3 months that I got here. I ran a K-2 school with 300 students. We had 10 paras and 2 teachers for intervention purposes. Our Bakey school has 350 students. They have 2 paras. Now, that does not include special education resources. This is not about special education. It's about prior to special education. I'll talk about that in a moment. The next slide shows our grades 3, 4, and 5 data. And I won't go over every single score, but I really just wanted to note that this is when you start to see the PACE academic assessments emerge in our data. And sure enough, there's the PACE assessment, and I know that there's been a lot of conversation about, is the PACE assessment a valid assessment? Is it intense enough? Is it easier for the kids because it's administered by our staff? And the reality is that it shows that it's very rigorous. Our F&P scores, again, 34% of students struggled, and on the PACE ELA score, 59% struggled. And so I just want everyone to see that if you have, I know you all know percentages, and I don't want to minimize anyone's intelligence, but I do want to point out that if you have 100 students in a grade level, which we often do, that means that 31 of our kids are struggling in one grade level. So if you multiply that by 3 grade levels, that means 90 students are struggling, right? And that's really concerning. Those are kids that need help. And that's when I get a little concerned. If I go on to the next one, we start to see exactly what happens, which is that students in elementary school are in tight, small classrooms with between 16 to 20 students and one teacher. They tend to do really well in that really restrictive environment. But when you get to grades 6, 7, and 8, you start to see that the students have more independence and the teachers aren't always guiding them through their work, which is something that they need to learn to do. And you can see that the scores correlate to that developmental phase. So I was very concerned to see our PACE math scores in 6th grade. 54% got a 1 or a 2, and 46% got a 3 or 4 in grade 6, and 75% got a 1 or a 2 in grade 7, and 25% got a 3 or a 4. The numbers were better on the NWEA, which is very positive because that's a very solid exam. But I would like to spend some time this summer talking with folks about what these scores mean and what happened. Again, these are the students that we would target by funding intervention to help them to do better. Our special education numbers are about 20%. So even if we took all of those kids out, we would still have 50% of students getting a 1 or a 2 on those assessments. And I also want everyone to recognize that having an IEP does not make a student necessarily struggle with reading or math. One of my strongest reading students as a principal had a significant IEP. So it's important to recognize that the percentage of students with IEPs doesn't necessarily correlate to academic data, although oftentimes there is a pretty close correlation. And then if you look at the next slide, you have grades 9, 10, and 11. And again, those same PACE scores correlate directly to our SAT and PSAT scores. So this will all be available for you to review. But again, I continue, Mr. Stack allocated 1 high school teaching position to math intervention because we can see right now that in 9th grade, 72% of our kids need help in math to prepare for the SAT, and the same thing in 10th grade. So I also wanted to point out that a school board member asked me to research SAU 80 in Belmont because they have 1,300 students and we have 1,600, so it's somewhat similar. They do have more free and reduced lunch. They have, down at the bottom you can see they have about 34% free and reduced lunch. But what really struck us when we looked at their data was that their class sizes were a little bit bigger, but their paraeducator support staff was, we have 4.5 positions for regular education, they had 16. And their academic scores on ELA proficiency and math proficiency were almost double ours. So again, that validates the point that our teachers are already doing incredible work trying to provide and providing targeted intervention for small groups. They need more help. And they know that. And they're wonderful about it. So I just want everyone to understand our teachers are doing a great job. I want to help them to do even better. So at Sanborn, we strongly believe that all students must continually grow in their learning. And of course, students learn in different ways and at different speeds. We also recognize that our test scores, a critical component of assessing student progress, and that of our district as a whole, are not where we want them to be. So this is the big question. I answered the question why. The reason why is that we need academic support for students, and we can either pay for that by adding it to the budget, or we can reorganize our resources and use those resources differently to meet the needs of our students. My job is to tell you the options, and we're here to listen to you tonight, and I'm really glad that you're all here. It is really important to recognize that children are learning to read from age 3 through 3rd grade. Once students leave 3rd grade, they begin reading to learn. If you are behind when the reading to learn phase, not only do you struggle with the reading, but you also struggle with the learning. So if you're a year behind, it's going to take you at least 2 years to catch up. And for some students, it takes 4 years or more, or we lose them. Dropout rates can be predicted by kindergarten assessment scores. The state of California builds prisons based on the academic scores in kindergarten and 1st grade in their state. They know. There is a huge correlation between your future and your ability to read. So it's imperative that we help our students before they get too far behind, and yet currently we do not have the staff to do this critical work. This help is called intervention. It's a structured plan to help students get to the I understand so that they can move on in their learning. Similarly, students who are not proficient with math facts early in their learning will not be able to apply them to real-life problems. Adults coaching students one-to-one or in small groups outside the traditional classroom setting, providing alternative ways to solve problems or simply more time to get it, is the support students need through the tricky parts of their learning. This help is called intervention. So intervention looks like this pyramid. RTI, response to intervention, is a system of instruction where schools provide targeted and systemic interventions or help to all students as they demonstrate the need. I want to be sure that everyone hears what I'm saying, as they demonstrate the need. For a student to get special education support, it can take upwards of the better part of a school year. I want students to get help the week they fall behind, or within a few weeks of when they fall behind. I think about what I would want for my 10-year-old when he's struggling. He had a speech impediment, and one of the worst days of my life was sitting on the other side of the IEP team with my son. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and boy, did it teach me a lot about how to run an IEP meeting. And his speech is doing way better now, but I'm really glad that he had a father who knew about the process and how to get him the services that he needed, but it still took 6 months to get it for him, even with my level of knowledge. If they had just helped him the first day of kindergarten, we wouldn't have needed to have an IEP for him. So tier 1 is in the classroom. Our teachers do an incredible job of trying to provide intervention for students and moving them through the academic targets. Tier 2 is targeted small group instruction. You may have heard about this from your teachers, called the WIN period, the LEAP period, the success period, or focused learning time. So we have a period of the day in all of our schools where all the teachers shuffle the kids and give them an opportunity to learn the skills that they need. We're doing a really good job with that. Imagine if we could do it 4 or 5 times a day instead of just 1 time a day. So I just wanted everyone to understand what tier 3 is more specialized individual help, and that happens right before a student gets a special education referral. Right now, our tier 2 process is done mostly by our classroom teachers. Our goal is to give them the help that they need to do that even better. So why are we considering reorganizing to meet this need? Well, if we don't reorganize, the district would have to fund the programs. But the reality is that at Memorial School and Bakey School right now, there are often times where we have a low enough enrollment where if we had more classrooms in a grade level together, we could potentially consolidate the resources. So if you look at the 3rd grade right now, at Bakey we have 13, 15, and 14, and at Memorial we have 16 and 17. But if they were all in one building, we would have class sizes of 18 and 19 in 3rd grade, and 1 teaching position would be reallocated to school-wide intervention. That's the way this model works. We were planning that roughly 6 teaching positions, 4 of them would be reorganized to intervention, and the other 2 would be able to go to paras. And a lot of people have said to me, well, would teachers lose their jobs? I just want everyone to understand that I'm not losing any sleep over anyone losing their job, because the reality is that the number of staff that we have retire or take a job in another district is so high that we already have 4 teaching positions that are 1-year positions for next year as placeholders for folks so that no one loses their job, and I only need 6. So I just want everyone to understand that we're planning ahead in the event that the board makes this decision, because we don't want anyone to lose their job. I do want to say, just to be clear, that whenever you're reorganizing, there is the possibility of staff reductions, and we will do whatever we can to maintain our current staff. I cannot say with 100% certainty that everybody will work out, but I'm very confident based on the fact that we reduced 7 positions last year and we didn't lose a teacher. So strengths and improvements. Again, I want to wrap up back on the first slide. Our teachers are our greatest asset. I'm asking you as a community to help me support them in meeting your children's needs. If the debate tonight leads to the point where we reorganize to do that, that's fine. If it leads to the point where we fund the intervention, that's fine. I'm just telling you as your educational leader that we need these resources to help the children learn. Thank you very much and have a great evening. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to introduce Todd DeMitchell. He'll be facilitating the forum component of this evening. So he'll kind of talk to you about the guidelines. And for those of you who are here in September, Todd is the gentleman who facilitated the forum in September, the first forum about the NASDAQ stuff. Thanks, Todd. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. There is room down here if you'd like to come down, so please feel free to. No, okay. Good evening, and thank you for attending this evening's school board meeting to discuss proposed K-8 organization plan. On September 19, 2018, the school board held a meeting seeking input on NASDAQ's school facility study option. If you could leave those open, any of the others would be great. Thank you. Unless you're going to speak. Okay. This evening's meeting is a follow-up to that September meeting, and the school board seeks to provide the community with another opportunity to share their positions and to ask questions. As Superintendent Ambrose said, my name is Todd DeMitchell, and I'll be your facilitator tonight. Poltergeist, I guess. I don't know where those came from. Okay. I will act as your facilitator this evening. My task is to help the community, you, to have a respectful discussion about the proposed reorganization so as to inform the citizenry and provide information that will inform the board's decision with your elected representatives. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes, as per policy, to ask for clarification or to state a position. If all members are to have an equal opportunity to comment on this important issue, we will need to be respectful of the time available for your neighbors to also speak. I will also ask the board and the superintendent to be respectful with the time as well when they're giving their responses. We should be concise, stay on topic. I ask the community members to join the school board members in listening with an open mind. Accept others as worth listening to and learning from, and that we separate the people from the issue. Reorganization of schools is a difficult issue in any school district. It involves both promise and loss. What does a change mean to me? How do I do it? And what will its impact be? It is also a promise of issues addressed and improvements made. Change often involves loss of what is known and often loss of what is comfortable. Will the change be successful?
We do not check our emotions at the door. The challenge is, how do we use our emotions to inform the discussion and not to overwhelm the discussion? It is this tension of promise and loss that the school board seeks to explore this evening. I will alternate sides. If, with the 3 minutes, so if the speaker's over there, when you see me stand up on this side with the yellow caution, that means you have 1 minute left. When I come up with the red one, time's running out, you need to wind up. I talk to the orchestra and the music is starting to come up. So I'll ask you to all be respectful at the time for the next person who's coming. If the speaker is veering off target and use it as more of an occasion to just talk about other concerns and issues, I will step forward to help bring them back onto the topic. That's why we came this evening, is for the topic. If the speaker is disrespectful to others, I will intervene. With the two sides, we just kind of split in the middle, starting with Phyllis going back on this side. If you choose to speak, if you want to be a speaker, please come up here. We'll take the chairs here. If we need more room, we'll come up this way, up the hallway, and into the cafeteria. On this side, I have no idea where that exit goes, but you'll go that way. So we'll alternate between the two. So this will be a good way for me to also to make sure that nobody gets to speak twice before everybody's had a chance to speak once. When you come up, I ask you to state your name, spell your last name, please. Or sometimes they're really hard to catch in the minutes. Also, please name the town that you're in. Are there any questions about the process that we'll use this evening? Can I see a quick show of hands for those who plan on speaking tonight? A few that, okay. Of those hands that are up, how many are looking at the, focusing on the elementary? The secondary, or just generally everything? Most people, okay. We'll get ready. Let's start, no questions. Then what I'll do is, could you come up, those who would like to speak, this side, starting here, and that side. And as soon as I see that we're set up, I'll start on that side over there if I have anybody. I see one person.
If I can intervene, excuse me 1 second.
Sure.
When you come to the podiums, if you would give your name and the town so that the secretary, Phyllis.
He said that.
Oh, you said
Oh,
that.
say that.
I'm so glad I was paying attention. All right. I got that one wrong on the test.
Okay, so we're all on this side here. Okay, now I'll go over here. We'll start with you, and until somebody comes over there, we'll stay on this side here. Please start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Gluck from Newton. And I just have a question, actually, for Mr. Ambrose. I missed the first part of your presentation, but my question is related to the classroom sizes that you put up for third grade. And that's based on the projections for September 2020, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we presented a number of slides at the last presentation that had the projected enrollments for those. Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks. Using my NPR voice. No, we did project, and it's important to recognize that I think those numbers were actually this year's third grade, correct? That's today's third grade, so those will be fifth graders in 2020.
Okay. So what my question is we're projecting out based on the enrollment we have today. So over the summer, families come and go. So next summer, you'll have a better idea of what your class sizes will look like. My question is, how will you determine what's the maximum class size? Because looking at the reconfiguration with the elementary schools, you know, it's tight. It's going to be tight. So when will you determine if you've got 18 or 19 in a section, that you need to have another class. And what's our guidelines? I know there's a policy that gives a guideline for grade levels. So that's my question.
Okay. Well, we'll do the same process that we do now. Typically, what has been or what I look at when I'm meeting with administrators in the spring and during the budget process. The hard part right now is that we budget for almost 12 months before school starts anyway. So we'll start doing the fall of 2020 budget at the end of August. So I have said to the board regularly in the time that I've worked here that we really need to have contingency funds for those very situations. So this year, the board put out a warrant article that funded a $75,000 contingency fund. Part of this plan would be that we would have to talk about adding to that fund so that if we had a classroom of 18, really the optimal size for instruction, the maximum size for instruction for grades K through 2 or 3, in my mind, are about 18. Right? And then after that, 20. And so every school, my first year as a principal of an elementary school, we had 21 students move into first grade in August. It was really hard. Luckily, we had some small classes, but it was tight, and we were at 19 and 20 in a room, and that wasn't very comfortable. So I guess what you're asking me is, what's the tipping point?
And then how are you going to accommodate for that within these schools where you only have so many rooms?
Right. Well, the nice thing about the reconfiguration is that there's more. That's part of why we looked at pre-K 3 at one building and 4, 5, 6 at another, is because there's more flexibility for expansion and contraction when you have more classrooms at one grade level. There are times also where there are many different ways to address this problem, but the classroom space isn't what I worry about as much as the economics of hiring and paying for an unanticipated teacher. And I've been very clear from day one that I have been concerned that there is not an adequate fund for those types of situations. So the board is addressing that, and we did add money for that this year. The numbers component of it is, it's hard. It depends on the students. If the students if we know the students and we know how the classrooms are set up, sometimes you can have a few more students. But if you have a class that has students who are really struggling behaviorally or academically, it may be that 18 is a hard tipping point, right? Where you say, okay, we've got 5 classrooms of 18 and 3 of them have gone to 19. We're going to create another room and get everyone down to 16 or because the whole group is struggling. We've got a group right now, one classroom at one of our elementary schools that we had a long debate in the budget process last year about whether or not to reduce a teaching position, and it really boiled down to the needs of the students. So it's a complex answer. The bottom line is you have to have contingency funds and you have to have an awareness of the kids. I certainly would say that for K2, when it starts getting to 19 or 20 in a room, you got to add a teacher, right? 18's the goal.
Thank you. See nobody on this side. Over here, if you could state your name, spell your last name and your town, please.
Yes, my name is Melissa Hilfer, Hilfer, and I'm from Kingston. I'm here for a couple of reasons because not only am I a townsperson who owns a home, but I have 3 children at the Beakey Elementary School, and I'm also in charge of the before and after care program at Beakey Elementary. And I have a couple of things in response to your presentation, Superintendent Ambrose. One is that the fact that the middle schoolers are interested in hanging out with the high schoolers, that doesn't actually come as a surprise to me, and it certainly isn't reassuring. That's what I would expect. I run a mixed age group. My youngest child is 5 years old, and I have kids that are 11 in my program. The fact that the little ones want to hang out and play with and spend time with the big kids doesn't surprise me at all as an educator, as a professional, or as a parent, but it does concern me greatly. I know that there's been a lot of talk of how we're going to keep all of those kids separate. They're going to be squished into that one wing. Everything's going to be fine. There's going to be different passing times. Where there's a will, there's a way. If a little kid wants to find a big kid or vice versa, I feel like you'll be hard-pressed to find a way to keep them apart, though I do imagine that many people are working on ways to make it feasible. I'm also concerned because while I represent a smaller group population-wise, There are anywhere from 30 to 40 families that will be using the before and after care programs, and twice as much when you factor in if we regionalize completely with Newton. The YMCA runs a program in both Memorial and Bakey. We are going to be looking at what amounts to several families in these towns splitting their children up and utilizing the same program that will end at 6 p.m. and find a way to get from work, wherever that may be, to get a 4th grader or a 6th grader and then turn around and race back to Kingston to get a preschooler or a 3rd grader. That's untenable for a lot of families. It's difficult for some families to get to me by 6 o'clock. I can only imagine. I myself will look at potentially putting both my 4th and 6th grader on a bus to send them home to Kingston because they will actually be physically closer to me at my house than they would be if they were in Newton, were I to continue my position after school. Thank you. So I think that there are a lot of things that need to be considered, absolutely, and I don't doubt that many people are looking at it from many different angles, but I feel like those parents that maybe can't be even here tonight because they utilize the facilities that I provide might also never have a chance to get their voices heard. And I just think that splitting up these kids is going to make it very difficult for a lot of families, both in Kingston and Newton.
I just wanted to mention that we have developed a plan for the aftercare, which is that there will be a shuttle bus between the schools. So we did look at that.
Has that been communicated to the YMCA?
We haven't worked with the YMCA yet because the board has not adopted a plan that would go into the next phase, which is the logistical phase. We're in the feasibility phase right now. But yes, we have considered that, and we have not talked to the YMCA, but we have talked to transportation.
Okay, that's interesting to me. Please take the time to consider ratios because someone will have to be staffed to maintain what kids are shuttled.
We'd be happy to work collaboratively with you to solve those problems. They're great problems that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come to this side and we'll come back to Mr. Dan and here and back again. So if you please come, state your name, spell your last name and the town, please.
My name is Jamie Osgood, O-S-G-O-O-D. I'm from Newton. I've got a few questions, but to be respectful, I'll just try to keep it to one. I can appreciate the presentation you put on and all the hard work and thought that went into this. You know, for me, there's some unanswered questions. I don't really have an opinion on this one way or the other. I just want to get some more facts, I guess. And I guess one of my top questions is, as far as growth, I know we have declining enrollment, and I know Timberlane School District has had that same issue. And my question is, why is that happening? And the reason why I ask why is, you know, if you go to the United States Census Bureau and you look at the components of population change, they're stating that there's a birth every 8 seconds, a death every 12, an international migrant every 34 seconds, and there's a total of a net gain of 1 person every 16 seconds. So my question is, why is the enrollment declining if the population continues to rise? It just doesn't make sense to me.
So if you'll send me an email, I'll send you the link to the NASDAQ study that went really deep into this. But I'll give an overview for the folks in the audience tonight. Over the last 10 years, we've lost 400 students.
Right, I saw that.
We had 2,000 students 10 years ago. We're down to 1,600, and we're projected to lose another 400 in the next 10 years. But when I do my work, I like to look at the number of students actually seated in our schools. So the answer why is because New Hampshire's losing about 50,000 students in the next 5 to 10 years. And that is significant. The commissioner spoke about that when he was here. And what he said is that it's actually the number of births in New Hampshire. And this is not just a New Hampshire issue, it's a New England issue. The NASDAQ study went into detail also about how families are typically trending toward buying homes near urban centers where there's more work when they're young. And then what's happening is the folks who are ready to retire are selling their homes to those families and then buying a home here, which is less cost globally than it would be in one of the urban centers. So it really is a complex issue of actual number of births with the way the real estate market and the job market is working, which is why I've said from the beginning that I would not support selling the middle school should it be closed. What I would like to see us do is to either, quote, pickle it which means, you know, close it up and keep it warm enough so it doesn't deteriorate, or rent it to someone with the caveat that any updates or upgrades that need to happen would be a part of their lease. Because the district shouldn't invest more money in the building.
Do we have a strategic planning committee?
Yeah, we do not have one at this point, but this is the next step to that strategic plan.
Okay.
We have to figure out what to do with our enrollments first and what buildings we'll have, and then we'll have to work out the strategic plan for that.
How am I doing for time, sir?
You haven't hit, you're close to the yellow, not there yet.
Okay, I have one more quick question. Transportation, I know that, you know, there's gonna be different start times for schools, for the elementary reconfiguration. My concern is if, with this reconfiguration, it could cause the bus time to go a little longer. And if it doesn't, and we get more buses, I wonder about the cost, because I know Timber Lane went from 29 to 28, and they saved about $60,000. They said one bus costs about $60,000. So just a quick question on that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question that a lot of people wonder about. I met with the transportation company last week, and moving 7th to 8th grade to our high school actually improved our busing because we have such low ridership at the high school. Almost all of our high school kids ride with their friends, right? So we have sometimes 10 or 15 kids on a high school bus. The reality is that the busing runs for us cost about $37,000, and throughout this reduction of students, we haven't really cut any runs. So our runs in our district need to be revamped.
Mm-hmm.
And the bus company knows this.
Right.
But what we agreed to do is wait and see what happens with this, because it takes a lot of time to revamp a bus run. But I will say that there's a high likelihood that we'll actually reduce some busing services. But it really depends on, we put in contingency money in case we needed additional bus runs, because there was a rumor out there that students would be on the bus for an hour.
Yeah,
that's absolutely preposterous.
Yes.
We set the bus run length, but it costs more to have kids on the bus less time. I myself have ridden the buses. Some of our bus runs are 15 to 20 to 25 minutes with 20 kids, and some of our other bus runs are 45 or 50 minutes with 25 kids. It's just, it needs to be completely revamped. But if we tell the bus company no more than 35 minutes, then they just tell us what that costs. So the answer is we don't know today, but we plan contingency money, but I have a hunch that it's going to come down.
Okay.
One thing I will say is that our community is going to have a conversation about whether or not we're going to have more regionalized stops, because there's a lot of door-to-door pickups right now, and that is very, very expensive.
And you don't believe that in the future that busing costs would fall on families? Because I know, for instance, Saugus School District has to pay for their busing in Massachusetts.
I've not participated in that conversation. That would be a question for the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael Gannon, Gannon, town of Kingston. Mr. Ambrose, I received a newsletter the other day, and there was a piece in it that I have a question on. It has to do with sports. And I understand the education, the math, and English come first.
Yeah.
Sports play an important part in our community. And you indicated that sixth graders will not play in sports when this transition takes place, and I understand it's an NHIAA policy. But then you went on to say there'll be a few less students participating in the middle school teams, and it should not affect the 7th and 8th grade teams. I don't believe we have 7th and 8th grade teams. We have the middle school team, based on my experience. Currently, I'm the coach of the track team. 104 students participate in the middle school. And close to a third of them are 6th grade students. I took a look back on the rosters, because I also do basketball and soccer, just to take a look at what role do 6th graders play. 2 years ago, my basketball team, it was a girls' team, 60% of them were made up of 6th graders. Soccer team, the rosters I had, and again, it only goes back a few years, although I've been doing it for about 14. 6th graders tend to make up close to about a third. I had percentages going from 28%, 30%, etc. So I just found this a little misleading based on my experience and the data I have from the programs I participated in. Just looking out into the future, I just foresee that we'll have fewer teams at the middle school level because we won't have the sixth graders to support and participate in it. I just wanted to, at least from my perspective, and again, from my data, wanted to pass that along. Thank you.
Mr. Gannon, thank you for everything that you do for our kids. It's amazing. We appreciate you very much.
Hi, I'm JJ Defeo, DEFEO, and this might get close to the 3-minute mark. And I'm here in strong opposition to the proposed district reorganization. And not only does it have a truly insignificant tax impact, but could harm students in numerous ways. So just for the tax thing, I did it out. I called the Newton and Kingston town halls both, and based on the numbers that they gave me, it would be $65.60 per year saved. So just for the people, and that's like less than 1.5 gas tanks. So just to put that in perspective. Something I've heard around is that if these get voted down, that we would have to do renovation to the middle school right away. And something that I've heard a lot about that is that the windows, I go there, I don't see a problem with the windows. And I talked to Mr. Ambrose with the rest of the middle school student council. A lot of the things in the immediate category are not, according to him, required by code, so why are they there? It's just rhetorical. So yeah, I personally think that's a little misleading. Anyway, so let's turn to the more expansive and greatly more important non-financial side, and a reason proponents for this plan is with student consistency. They would say that the two elementary schools bring them up differently, and that's a reason we should combine them and bring all the students together through the same system. But if that's so, why don't we just bring the other school that's lacking up to there, talk to the teachers on the ground, and give them what they need, right? And so that's just something that's been bugging me. Another thing is that putting the kids through pre-K all the way through 12 would bring us better sense of community and be beneficial to them. I don't think that that's true. In 6th grade, by the end of 7th grade, it doesn't matter. Kingston and Newton kids, we mix together, we work well in groups together. There's no difference between us by the end of 7th grade. Something else that's in contrast would be negative is that at age 9 in grade 3, splitting the most vulnerable kids that this plan is attempting to help from the pairs and specialists that they've known for almost half their lives and grown to trust at age 9, and just splitting them off into a completely new school would be tough for them, and that would be blindsiding them and completely counterproductive. By grade 5, right, when they do combine with these and do leave, they're much more independent and able to adjust to these things. Something that another thing is teacher collaboration is brought up, right, and that they can collaborate more. There's communication services they're so apparent nowadays that there would be why are we looking to this to be our number one way to get teacher collaboration? This should not be our number one way to get teacher collaboration improved. Again, when the student council and I met with Mr. Ambrose, we asked about how we would keep the pupils of the two schools separate after school. He said that inside the building that they had a plan that inside the building they would be monitored and made sure that they don't intertwine and mix up. But outside of the school building, if they walk or if they just go to the fields to hang out, that based off what I could tell, that there wasn't a specific plan for that, based off what I could tell. And we did get an answer about that the buses would be mixed, so that would be a place that they would after school be able to interact, which is not that, like, the fact that 18 to 19-year-olds and the 12 to 11-year-olds would be on the same bus together, which is a problem. A tough problem to discuss is the drug problem. In the middle school, there are Juuls, which for those that don't know are similar to vapes, but easier to hide. There are kids who drink, there are kids who do weed. I know that there's much worse in the high school, and exposing these kids as young as 11 to giving them the exposure to these much more illicit and these much more dangerous substances are, like, that's just something that's been nagging at me that I don't think is a good idea. Anyway, just to sum it up, intervention does not equal either choosing this plan or choosing to pay for it. How about we research something, alternatives? Why don't we try looking somewhere else first? Why don't we delay? Here's an idea, delay it for a year so we can look everywhere. Because we're rushing this to June. That's a month away, if I'm correct. Why don't we slow this down and really look at everything and discuss and research and discuss alternatives thoroughly and completely? Generally, informed students, at least at the middle school, are against this, and I urge everyone else to do the same. Thank you.
If you could give your name, spell your last name, and your town, please.
Sure. Taryn Lytle, Kingston. It's Lytle. And I apologize for coming in late. I was busy dropping my own child off at dance. So I'm speaking tonight as a public school teacher who's taught both middle and elementary school, and as a parent whose children have attended the elementary, middle, and high schools here at Sanborn. And I currently have a middle schooler and a high schooler. The first thing that I'd encourage everybody to do, including the board and budget committee, the staff, the administration, and parents, is to think about the most important job of our schools, which is to provide the very best educational experience for children. To me, this means using the largest percentage of every dollar in our very meager budget to directly improve educational outcomes for each child. In layman's terms, this means recruiting and retaining the most talented and motivated teachers, engaging a sufficient number of well-trained and compensated support staff, providing a well-equipped, safe, and up-to-date learning environment, and utilizing a wide selection of compelling books, technology, and other robust learning materials. There is no doubt in my mind that educational outcomes for children are positively influenced when teachers and support staff have the opportunity to collaborate and coordinate grade level instruction, as well as communicate frequently with all specialists about their students. I also understand as a teacher that literacy intervention in the early elementary years is critical for content mastery in grade 4 and beyond. If you are intervening starting in grade 4, you have already missed the window. Realigning the elementary schools to a lower and upper elementary model makes sense educationally. And it is not an uncommon structure, although it is uncommon for our particular district. I worked for 5 years in a district that had an early childhood center, an elementary school, and a middle school that started in grade 5. And then students chose from 4 different area high schools after grade 8. The students in that district transitioned seamlessly between the grades and locations, and all of the adults made it work. Regarding the numerous concerns brought up about the proposed changes, which have been addressed in large part by the document published by the superintendent a few weeks ago, and I'm sure gone over again tonight, adults are not usually fans of change, myself included. We worry about our family routines being upset. We worry about not knowing every person our child sees. We worry that our children will not thrive. We all want what is best for our own kids. However, these are pretty standard adult worries. Students, by and large, are energized and engaged by the adults around them. I taught on a grade 5 team at a middle school, and each year the parents of the 5th graders were sleepless with worry about their child coming into a building where 8th graders also learned. Because if you see a 5th grader, they look like tiny little kids, and some 8th graders look like full-grown men. As a 5th grade team of professional educators, we understood the parents' concerns, and we prioritized helping the parents transition, which tended to be a much bigger job than helping their children adjust. Our 5th graders were happy, healthy, and excited to be part of a middle school while still being nurtured like the 10 and 11-year-olds that they were. I have every reason to believe that the teachers at Sanborn are just as capable as my team was, and regardless of location, will nurture each and every child at an appropriate developmental level. Children excel in school when they are surrounded by supportive, positive adults in the home and in the classroom. In summary, I encourage and will support the board and the administration as they look for every opportunity to improve student outcomes and elevate learning in Sanborn from K through 12. I expect the board and the budget committee and the administration to dedicate every dollar that may be recovered from not funding an additional building and reconfiguring our grade spans at the elementary schools to go towards improving the educational learning opportunities for Sanborn students. This means investing in staff, training, rich literature, and experiences that enhance every student's school day, regardless of their grade or building location. Thank you.
Wrong side. No, yes. You're up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Radford, R-A-D-F-O-R-D, and I'm from Kingston. And this is my camera club night, people. And to get me to leave that, there's a good reason I had to come. Looking at the statistics, I was appalled. And people don't know, years ago, my husband and I were the first family to ever take the school board to a due process hearing. And my son ended up going to a residential school. And the problem is, he went 3 years, he repeated first grade, second grade, and they were going to keep him back in 3rd grade. I think they were glad when my kids were out of the school district because Ma was a screaming Mimi and wouldn't let up. I think the biggest fault in looking at the numbers again is what brought me here. I think the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade need to be no more than 10 kids in the classroom so that you can pick up these problems with the kids in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, because otherwise you've lost it. And I'm wondering if a lot of how many homeschooled children do we have in the district? Does anybody know?
I don't have the exact number memorized. Jody, do you? I can get that for you in just a second. We don't have many, but we're going to look it up so that we're accurate.
I was just curious.
We have very few.
But I think that is playing a lot into the decline. And especially with all the shootings and everything going on in the schools, I think parents are afraid. And myself, my feelings are, if things continue to go the way they're going, we're going to end up teaching your kids at home with teachers online, on the internet. That's my own personal feeling where I think we're going. And, yeah, okay. Because we need to pick up the problems of the kids in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And I think this is our biggest problem. We're losing them in that area. And are there any Orton Gillingham teachers in the school district today?
Yes.
My son was, very severe dyslexic. And that was the one thing that we ended up, they did go along and we hired. So that's just my 2 cents worth. I don't know. But 59.
69.
Oh, 69, which that's a lot. All right, thank you, everybody.
Hi, my name is Kyle Soucy, S-O-U-C-Y. I have a 3rd grader and a kindergartner at Bakey. And my first question relates to the students needing intervention. It said that in the presentation, a teacher position allocated to school-wide intervention would possibly happen. What does this mean? Does the teacher have to get some kind of different certification? Are they ready to go flip of a switch?
In the next phase, we'll develop a job description for the position, but I can share with you the core components. Typically, people who teach intervention would have an advanced degree in the area that they provide intervention in. So oftentimes they have a master's degree or higher in literacy intervention. And a lot of times, folks who do intervention in math would have a math degree and focus on math. It's a little trickier to find an elementary teacher who has a background solely in math, because typically they teach all 4 content areas, but there is a state certification for intervention. And so what we would look to do is to, I know there's a lot of anxiety about the board making this decision in mid-June, but I continue to remind everyone that if a move is going to take place, we start budgeting for 2020 at the end of August, early September. And so these positions, we want to let teachers know what the expectations are, just like we do our budget. We want to tell teachers, if you're interested in being in an intervention position, this is what the criteria would be, and then provide them the support that they would need to get that criteria met before the change occurs. It's also important to note that it's a 2-year process. So the first year is more about doing the work at the high school that needs to be done, funding, the locker room for the students, because the 7th and 8th grade students would have their own locker room, funding the multi-stall bathroom for 7th and 8th grade, funding the science rooms and some other main office. Though once those things are done, we'd add more intervention staff in year 2 with the funds that were allocated to those initial capital costs. So it really is, if you read it carefully, it's a 2-year plan, and the budget reflects that. But the job descriptions, I think that we will be ready to have a conversation about right away. And then the second piece is that we would want to work collaboratively with the teachers union to have those positions be a part of the teachers contract, because we want to keep our staff, and we have some really good staff that are interested in this work. And so we'd want to make sure that they maintain their riffing rights and seniority as a part of the process. So there is a little bit of work to do, and it's work that cannot be done unless the board makes a decision. We can't do it ahead of time. We could work on the job description, but we can't work on the rest. And we can't add a literacy intervention teacher to the teacher's contract if we don't have one. So we're ready to go when it's time, but we understand that there's some anxiety amongst the staff about taking a position that doesn't participate in the rights of the collective bargaining agreement.
Do the intervention teachers get paid the same, more?
Yeah, they'd be on the teacher's contract, same experience, same everything. Yep.
Okay.
And yep. The paras would be on the para contract. So there's, like at Bakey, there would be, in the plan, there's 5 paras and 2 teachers, 1 teacher for math and 1 for reading. And the paras would be allocated based on student need. So if we have more students who are struggling in math, paras might be doing more math work under the direction of the math teacher. If we have more students who are struggling in reading, we may do the reverse.
And for the kids that do very well and need to continue to be challenged in different ways, what about the enrichment program at Bakey? I haven't heard anything mentioned about that. Will that be cut? Is that going to continue?
There's no intention to cut that. It's intended that that's maintained.
That's good to hear.
And it is important to note that when teachers have support to help students who are struggling, they have more time to allocate to the whole class, whereas it is hard. I mean, when you have 6 kids who are really struggling, or 4 kids that are struggling, you do spend more time with them naturally, But also, we will be looking at growth. We need to know which students are making growth. If a really high achieving student isn't making any growth for a year, then we need to address that.
Yeah.
So it is a balanced approach to looking at every student, each student's individual needs, and trying to meet those needs.
One last point I wanted to make out. There was a little bit of confusion here. Question 74 says about the students being bused, will a 12-year-old be on the same bus as a 17 to 18-year-old? This is by far my number one concern.
Yeah.
Upper level high school students rarely, if ever, take the bus. It is more likely that students from grades 7 to 10 would be on the bus. Juniors and seniors tend to drive or ride with friends. But yet, on page, question number 26, is there enough parking at the high school for staff? Yes, but there will be reduced student parking.
Yeah.
that's a
So
huge
it's
issue.
important to recognize, number one, high school kids, they ride with their friends, right? So we do need to go through the process of analyzing how many, I met with some people today at the high school about this. We will need to figure out exactly how many, the high school was built for 1,000 students, assuming that 500 of them would have their licenses, right? There's one of three things is going to happen. We're either going to have to give assigned parking spots to staff so that that's clearly delineated and done, and then have a lottery system for the upper grade kids, or pave the area over by the tennis courts and add that to the parking, and then reassess again. But I just want to be clear that even if, it seems like those two answers contradict themselves, and someone pointed it out after the FAQ went out. So I do agree with, I'm sorry for the perceived contradiction, but the reality is that our ridership at the high school level is incredibly low. But I also want to tell everyone and have you hear that just similar to what, I think it was Taryn Lytle, what she said about the kids being fine. My students go to a 600 student, my two boys go to a 600 student 4-5-6 school, or 3-4-5 school. They ride the bus in 6th grade with all the high school kids. And there is no, we're planning to have the middle school kids sit in the front, right, part of the bus and be dropped off first. So we are working really hard to try to figure out how to keep that as safe. And they have their own entrance into the building separate from the high school kids. So it is important to recognize that the 7th and 8th grade students, honestly, we have a lot of students in 7th and 8th grade now that get dropped off. I mean, our ridership is really low as a district. So I don't believe that there would be a real clash there, but until we do an actual study of the number of parking spots versus the number of staff and then see what's left, we do have some contingency ideas for additional parking.
Thank you.
Another question, we'll come back to you after.
Yep, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
My name is Alyssa Dillon, Dillon. I'm from Kingston. I have two children in the Bakey Elementary, and as much as I would dislike for them in the same household to be in different elementary schools, I'm actually here. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor, and I have a practice in Kingston, and I also work in the Exeter Hospital emergency room. And I do mental health evaluations often, and way too often I see children who are suicidal. We had actually a 2nd grader come in today. I didn't actually see them, but my concern is actually putting the 7th and 8th graders into the high school. I myself was bullied at 8th grade by someone in my junior high, and we were just 7th and 8th. So I think putting them into a high school with 9th through 12th graders, like the young man said about the drugs, and just really bad. I'm really concerned about bullying. That's my biggest worry for them. And also, if you do move forward in having the 7th and 8th graders in the high school, I would really encourage, or actually maybe require the guidance counselors to get some sort of emergency services training, because I think they, whether it's liability or they get really nervous, they hear someone talk about really being depressed and they ship them off by ambulance to the emergency room, and that's also pretty traumatizing. So we'd like to kind of weed some of the kids out of the ER, but there is a lot of bullying and a lot of kids overdosing and wanting to take their lives from bullying and different things. So that's really my concern.
Thank you.
My name is William Flaherty, Flaherty. I'm from Newton, and I'm an 8th grader at the Sanborn Middle School. I'm also the president of the Student Council and treasurer of the National Junior Honor Society. First, I would like to thank Superintendent Ambrose for coming to a Student Council meeting and also for coming to the school to listen to the opinions of the students on the proposed transition to the 7th and 8th grade to the high school. I would like to reiterate my opinion on keeping the middle school open, as I've been fortunate to attend the school for 3 years. I think it would be very difficult for a 7th grader to be in a school with a lot of older students. The middle school serves as a transition for students to be more comfortable with other students their own age and changing classes, etc. I feel that younger students might be intimidated by being at a school environment with much older students. I would also like to say that the loss of any teachers at the middle school, I think, would be very detrimental to the students. The teachers at the middle school really care about the students, work hard at teaching their specific subjects, and make sure the students will be prepared for high school. I hope you will take my opinion into consideration. Thank you.
Hi, Karen Campbell, CAMPBELL from Newton. I just have a concern. So I know you've been planning this, it seems like a long time, 18 months with the NASDAQ study. So in my opinion, when the NASDAQ study was presented, it was that we were building rich, cash poor, we needed to reconsolidate to save funds. So this is what had to happen. And recently, it seems that the parents are being sold that we're being reconsolidated to put intervention services into our schools, which is great, but I worry that once the schools are reconfigured 2 years down the road, that the intervention services that were sold to us will stop. Is there a way that a school board member can comment? I know Superintendent Ambrose is very passionate about this plan, that you can write in the intervention services will stay for 5, 10 years?
Oh.
I wish
This
we
is what
could
happens
say
when you're
that.
chairman, right? Okay. I think, I'm gonna tell you this. The major thing that I'm looking at is intervention. I mean, I see these scores we got today, and we're not doing too well. And I think intervention is gonna be a very major component, not only for those students, but keep them out, and I hate to use this term, because I was certified special ed, keep them out of the special ed situation, that you're gonna capture them so they don't have to get into that. I don't think my crystal ball is better than anybody else's, so 2 years, 5 years from now, we don't know. When I started teaching 20, 30 years ago, you know, it was a chalkboard, you know. I got all excited because I got an Apple IIe, you know. We don't know what's going to happen with technology and education. So for me to sit here and say 5 years from now, 2 years from now, we're going to be locked in, but I'll tell you, if we don't put a good amount of our financial resources into intervention, I'm going to be one very upset guy, all right? But I don't think anybody can answer what the future is going to bring, because you just don't know what the way things are moving so quickly. But as of what I do know now, we better put some serious money into early intervention.
Sure. Could I expand on that, Peter, if I might?
Yeah.
Every one of you have the opportunity to elect at least 2 or sometimes 3 of us every year. And that's when this question should be asked. Where do you stand on supporting intervention in our elementary schools? That is the question you should be asking those of us that seek re-election or the new people coming that want to come on board. And that's the opportunity to do that. Peter is right. We can't guarantee what's going to happen in 5 years or which one of us are going to be here in 5 years. But we could say at this point, we know that that's a major priority. But I personally can't say to you, it's not the only priority. We have too many buildings and we get other things to worry about as well. But intervention is a very high priority. It is for my colleagues and I at this point in time.
Right, so I have one more question, right? So there's a great cliche, the solutions of today are the problems of tomorrow. So to redistribute the schools puts the high school almost at full capacity. And I hear stories that in 6 years, Fremont's contract expires, and at the cost that they're paying us, perhaps $19,000 a student, they can send them to Pinkerton at $13,000 a student. So this is our future, and then is 5th and 6th grade at the high school. So my question to you is, I'd urge you to please pause. I know it's been 18 months. Can you pause and do a full study for the future, for the high school? Can we reach out to other towns to say, would you like to come join our high school? Was Raymond interested? I heard rumors of that, but they didn't want to stop us in our tracks because they know we're going to reconfigure. Well, maybe we need to pause another year and talk with Raymond to see if they'll come join us. Maybe we can hire, a teacher that specializes in coding and make our high school more desirable for other towns that want to come. There's a lot of questions of what's going to happen, and I think it's being sold on money, but there's other solutions out there. So I know this is the solution at the moment, but I don't think it's a very good one, and I'm not in favor of it, and I would ask you to please pause and consider all the funding sources, especially if we can't get a guarantee that the intervention services can stay. Thank you.
All right. This just fell on me again. After this meeting, we're having a non-public session. Non-public sessions, there's specific reasons why we can't talk publicly about it. We had a meeting with Fremont Monday, I believe. So I will say that a lot of what you just said, we're aware of, but we can't get into, especially the nitty-gritty about, but I will tell you, we are discussing with Fremont. Ellie is now going to be taking my job that I did Monday, and Jim will be doing it. We're going to meet them again in a couple of weeks.
We meet with them
Right.
next Tuesday.
We have a school board meeting with them Tuesday night, by the way. I'll be announcing that. So you're correct, and we're aware of it. And that's about all I can really say now, because you're talking negotiations, contracts, and all that. So your concerns have been heard by the board, and there is some movement. Who knows what the final result's going to be?
Thank you.
Cheryl Gannon, Gannon, from Kingston. I have 4 points and questions. I was wondering if the board, in their study of our situation, looked at other districts here in New Hampshire that have middle high school models. Some that I'm aware of are Gorham, Newmarket, Newport, Pittsfield, and New Middle High School in Milton, to see how it works with their student population. I think concerns that have been brought up are very valid, so it might be helpful to look at models that are already in existence and have been in existence for many years to see how they handle those situations. In regards to the facilities and the buildings that the district owns, we still have the seminary building. And we're still paying to keep that so it doesn't deteriorate even more. The last that I believe we heard was that the land swap with Kingston was going to go on the warrant this year, but it was held back because of some issues with the land at the fairgrounds. And I was just wondering if we could have an update on where that stands right now, if possible. With the reorganization, I'm wondering if the space that was set aside here when this building was built, this high school, there was a section that was set aside for future expansion. If this reorganization is undertaken with the 7th and 8th graders moving to this building, will that space still be available if we do need to expand in the future? In regards to test scores, we saw a lot of test scores tonight projected. And I would just caution looking at test scores, standardized test scores. Some students just aren't good standardized test takers. They seem to become so ingrained, and as we see recent scandals of getting good scores on tests cause a lot of pressure, and a lot of schools begin teaching to the test. To me, that's not good education. We do need to look at what the kids are doing in the school, in the classroom, every day, and look at those scores. I've even heard that there are some colleges now who are putting less emphasis on SATs and looking more at the high school transcripts. The last thing I wanted to mention was that it was troubling to see the number of students who are struggling in reading and math. Well, the superintendent told us that we have a wonderful teaching staff here. I don't doubt that in the least. I absolutely agree that we have great teachers. So I'm wondering, if we have great teachers, yet we still have kids who are struggling, what is the problem, besides them being in different buildings? Do we need to take a look at the model that's being used to teach students in the elementary school? When kids get to high school, they're offered levels of courses. There are foundations courses, there are advanced placement courses. Is that something that we might consider for kids in the elementary school if they're struggling, or if they're advanced, that there might be different types of placements that would still not throw out completely the fact that they're being included and that we can include them in other areas, but maybe in those core courses that might be something we want to take a look at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barry Gluck from Newton. And I will tell you frankly, I am skeptical. When I came this evening, I had many questions and many of the same concerns of some of the parents that I've heard speak. Superintendent Ambrose's presentation was actually very helpful, and I mean, made a very good case. The numbers are concerning. My question, I still wonder whether simply consolidating facilities and breaking the schools up is the best way to address those. There's no question that they need to be addressed. I'm not sure, I don't remember the name of one of the former speakers, but I know that Mrs. Lytle made an excellent point. Actually, listening to Mrs. Lytle was actually comforting in hearing about other districts that have broken things up this way, and it has worked well. So that was comforting, but she made a great point at the end, and that was if the funds that are freed up by doing this are then rededicated to intervention consistently going forward. And that's where I'm really skeptical. So I know we've heard from Mr. Broderick and we've heard from Mrs. Licio, their thoughts. But I would actually like to hear from the other members of the school board whether their intention is to make sure that all of the funds that are freed up for doing this going forward, that it is their intention to make sure that those funds are all applied towards the kids' education and to intervention, and not simply into reducing the tax burden. And as a past 9-year member of this budget committee, I also acknowledge that the budget committee plays a very big role in this, and while they can't speak at this forum, that's a question I would have for members of the budget committee as well. Clearly they can't answer that here tonight, but I would like to hear from the other members of the school board about where they stand about making sure that these funds go towards intervention going forward and not just towards reducing the tax burden. Thank you.
I'm going to answer your question. Before we started, I reminded the school board members that tonight is for us to hear from you. On either the 5th or the 12th, Mr. Ambrose and I haven't gotten together yet. We will be making decisions, and that will be the time that the school board members will give their reasons and rhymes and how comes and whys. So tonight, we're not going to get into questions and answers. I know I did answer that lady. I talked to Mr. which one of us would answer first, and there was another one I answered, and Mrs. Alessio spoke up. But that's really not the agenda or the reason for this forum. We need to hear from you. So we're going to take from you, and then when we meet, we will make our decisions, and then the school board members will answer questions or give statements. But tonight is not the night for that. Tonight's night is from you to us. So Barry, Mr. Gluck, I hear you, and that will be done. But to get into back and forth, tonight's really not the night. You know.
I just.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, my name is.
Could you hold one moment?
Sure.
Dr. Brown wants to.
I just want to say, I did want to make a statement tonight, but was told, let's hear from the public before we make our statements. I was the one who asked that SAU 80 slide be presented. That's the Shaker School District. They have the School Board of the Year awarded by the New Hampshire School Board Association. And so I looked at their website to see, okay, why are they the School Board of the Year? And it turns out that they have doubled the scores that we have at lower cost per pupil, but look at all the paras they're using. And that is the bargain that I would like to have with the superintendent. We're finding money to improve test scores, and the NESDEC people, when they came here, stated they were amazed that we had so many buildings given our student population. So even that outside group was a little alarmed at our excess capacity. So I'm always listening to people here. This is like the most important decision I'll be making as a school board member, but I'm here to improve test scores for the kids and make them successful. That's my interest. And I am listening about bus routes being too long. I'm listening to the mix of younger and older grades. Very concerning to me. I understand those issues as well. And I know that the superintendent is really concerned with his own young kids. He's thinking of them at the same time when you ask these questions. So they're all great questions, and I just want you to know I'm a teacher, and I joined the school board because of our assessments. Our kids are really smart. They just have to show it, that's all. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Ashley Page. I'm the infamous Facebook post person from Kingston. And thank you for everyone to getting back to me on that letter. So it seems like so many questions can't be answered until phase 2 of the plan, and that still worries me. And there's been a challenge to think about alternative plans. So in the spirit of alternative plans, I have a question, and I'm just trying to think outside the box. If a plan is voted on to split our elementary schools between 2 different towns, does that essentially eliminate forever the possibility of becoming 3 districts under 1 SAU? I feel like we should explore that first. If each school had their own school board and budget, I believe it would improve communication between schools and the board. I believe we could build budgets on more focused needs of each individual buildings and the intervention needs of each student population. I'm asking the board to delay the vote until we look into this reconfiguration option as well. We don't want to close this door to any other door that could benefit our students and taxpayers now or in the very far future. I know it requires a 2/3 vote to do this, but I just think that it's an option that is worth exploring.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ursula Giannusa, Giannusa. I live in Kingston. I have a first grader at the Bakey Elementary School, and I will be the first to admit that those test scores are horrifying. I don't like it. We work really hard, the kids work really hard, and I agree that something needs to be done, but I feel like there's one extreme or the other. Either we do this or we don't. How come there's no middle ground? So my question is, why don't we try some sort of interventionalist without splitting schools to see if that works? And if there's progress, go to the next phase rather than just dive right into the deep end. My other concern is this is all based on test scores. A lot of kids don't test well. My son does not test well. I just had his IEP meeting. I can say he was below average in everything. but he can read a third grade book. He can tell you all 63 Jupiter moons. I know, I hear them every night before bed. But he cannot pass a test to save his life. And that's what concerns me, is that we're going to rearrange all these schools and do all of this based on test scores, and that we can't read report cards. I think we need to slow down, just like everybody else is saying, and consider some kind of middle ground. That's really all I have. But is there any other plans besides these two? Yes or no? Is there anything that we can try that's like a middle ground?
I think it's impossible to assess the effectiveness of a program if you only do half of the program. But I will tell you that when I was the principal of a K-2 school, so I worked in a community for 5 years where I was the principal of the K-2 school, and we sent to a 3-5 school. Similar model as what this.
How long ago was that?
Just a few years, 4 years.
Okay.
When I was hired, we had 74% of our students were reading at grade level. When I left, 89% were reading at grade level. 6% were one level below. And the other 5% that were more than one level below were making more than a year's growth every year. I don't care about the state average. Not that you said that, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I've
like
had,
a big
I've
driving
had said
force,
to me,
though.
oh, well, our kids are doing better than the state average. Yeah, the state average is 40%.
Right.
I don't want the state average. I want 85%, 85% of our kids at grade level, because they can be. And I want the other 5%, one below, and I want the other 5 to 10% making at least a year's growth. I don't have a problem if your son's reading level isn't at benchmark if he's making a year's growth, because great teachers make more than a year's growth.
Right.
And I had a real problem when I was hired with people putting benchmark scores up and talking about the schools by grade level. So we would actually have our grade level teachers present at a school board meeting what their scores were, and that was not good for teachers. I did not like that. But what really wasn't fair was that they only presented the benchmarks. We had one kid grow 2.25 years in 1 year, and they were still below the benchmark, so they would have been in the red. That's ridiculous, right?
Right.
So we have to look at the whole picture, but there's so much information here. And for those of us who aren't living it all day, every day, like our teachers and administrators, it's hard to remember that we adopted a definition of student success that did not just focus on test scores for that very reason.
Right.
So I just want to give credit to the folks that worked on that the definition of student success is way broader than just test scores. I've been listening for a little while and not talking because I want to hear what you all have to say, but I just want to remind everyone that there has been, for some reason in our district, this dichotomy of either you do great on test scores or you take care of the whole kid. I don't believe any of that. We take care of test scores and the whole kid. It's both. It's not nature or nurture. It's nature and nurture. Right? So I just want to make sure everyone understands that my background is in guidance. I'd be the last person to tell you that the whole student doesn't matter.
Right, and there's a lot to digest, which I understand.
A lot, even for me,
June
right?
1st is 2 weeks away, and we need to have this decision by June 1st, so.
No, we need to have a conversation for budgeting purposes. If we are going to make the change for 2020, I need to know by mid-June, by the second board meeting, because the staff
I think that's
goes
his
away.
yellow, I haven't really talked a lot yet.
Yeah, no, this is my fault, I'm sorry. But I think it's really important to recognize that we start budgeting for a year out at the end of August. So if you talk about a delay or doing partial, it means putting it off for another whole season or two. And I want to be frank about this. If that happens, the budget's going up $1.5 million annually from my presented budget, because I'm not letting these kids hang like this.
Right.
I'm helping them, whatever it takes. And if it means putting myself out there, you need to know that there's a part of me. I try to be really calm and listen and be supportive, but I am passionate about this. If our kids don't know how to read, they will not make it as adults. They are not going to be in our world. They're going to be in a world where you have to teach yourself every day. They're going to be in a world where 50% of what they learned in their freshman and sophomore year of college will be out of date by the end of their sophomore year. If you can't read and do math, you will not succeed. There won't be cab drivers. It's going to be automated. There won't be packing jobs for kids who don't take school seriously. It's going to be automated. This is a pivotal point for our country, and our school system is just a microcosm of a major problem. But I want you to know, this isn't about, for me, this is a moral issue. And if you all say, if the whole board says to me, we're not going to move anything, we're going to leave it the way it is, I would expect that everyone would support me when I put $1.5 million into the budget and ask you to pay for it. It just has to be funded. We can't let kids do this. Our teachers need to be supported, and so do the kids. So thank you very much for listening to me go off a little bit there, but I just wanted you all to know that this is a very important topic, but I do not believe that you can do any kind of like test. I've done the test for 5 years, and we had 10 paras for 15 classrooms. We had 2 full-time interventionists when we moved the scores that much. So I've lived this work and done it, so I know how it can look.
Yeah, and I guess my other concern is the scores are so low, which again, we are still looking at scores, and there's 13 kids on average in a class, but now we're going to 19 kids.
No, it's really important to recognize that there isn't 13 kids on average. That was one grade.
But that's still a factor, though. That's so we can't be like, sorry, kids, you guys don't count. Like, we're still factoring that class, right?
Yeah. So the reality is that when you get to 18 kids in a class, that's a reasonable size class if you have adequate intervention programs. If you don't, that would be difficult.
Right. Thank you.
Corey Mason, Newton, New Hampshire, parent of a Memorial Elementary student, a high school student, and yes, I have another child entering Memorial, if so the plan might be. First off, thank you staff who are here. You guys have had a long day, and it doesn't go unnoticed by many of us, so we appreciate that and know that you're here on your time, and we want to thank you for that. Dr. Brown, I don't care about other communities right now. I care about ours. I am pleased that Shaker Regional School District is increasing their student outcomes. As you know and said during the March 6th board meeting, that they won the New Hampshire School Board Award for having a plan, for having a school board plan, a district plan. This high school, for which we're all in right now, opened up 12 years ago. Is that correct? 12 years ago? Okay. This high school opened up 12 years ago. As we've heard by many other speakers, that we have a campus, for which I was very fortunate to be part of a seminary subcommittee that was making monumental ground after many failed attempts to go ahead and do the land swap and others. That campus has been maintained, again, as many of us have heard, with annual expenditures that would have been better used, making an impact on student achievement today. Again, where's the plan? The challenge I have is we had a plan to open this awesome building years ago and fund this building years ago. The concern I have is, many of us may know, Superintendent, I don't know if you've actually expressed this, but the state of New Hampshire is going to have, what, 25% less students statewide?
50,000 students.
And there's currently 170,000 students in the state. 50,000 less students in the state. So we're not alone. I bring that up because I question, where's Fremont at the board right now in hearing these conversations? I feel as though I did not miss, if I missed that, I apologize.
Okay, I just want to cover.
But I feel like they need to hear these conversations because they have students here too today. Where have they been in the conversations that you've had relative to this entire plan? Because their contract is not up.
Can I just help you for a second? We met with them last week and we're meeting them again next week. We have been actively engaged, but we talked about that, I think, right before you walked in.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. I had softball. Really excited to not be on the board that can make those things happen now. So needless to say, long story short, what is a long-range plan? If we opened this building up less than 12 years ago, and we're now at a crisis of where we have more capital and land, and then we're building rich and student poor, where are we going to be when this shuffle occurs? We're going to need if we need $1.5 million right now because we had poor planning, which again, you were handed that, sir. I apologize for that, Superintendent. And I apologize also to the staff that are hearing me say that. It's not your fault. It's a bigger issue than itself. So my question is, what's the plan to address this here? What's the plan to address this in Fremont? What's the plan to address this in Rockingham County? Why not actually be at the forefront of discussions to do more regionalization, to actually go ahead and actually help everyone in our community, because we're gonna all be facing the same problem. So if we go ahead and do this, to me, this is nothing more than a shell game. We're trying to save money over here to put money into intervention. The reality is fund intervention and fix the long-term plan, is my opinion. So I ask this to go to vote to the community. Everything else, even a $10,000 hockey item, went to the community to vote on, which was shame on us. So why not go ahead and put this in front of the community, because this has greater impacts on us all, long term. Thank you.
My name is Alice Getchell, Getchell. I'm from Kingston, and I just want to go into a little bit of history. Some of you members of the school board were with me a long time ago when I came into the district in 1970. I had been teaching at a junior high school in Massachusetts. And I came into the district as a science teacher in 1970. That year, we were put on to double sessions because there was not enough room in the schools for our students. So I came into the district. Some of the students from Bakey were put into the high school, which is the old high school. I was put into the science building over there, which is condemned now, unfortunately. It's gone to disarray, which is very heartbreaking. We were on double sessions for 8 years. We did not jump into the first thing that came along. The school board members in the community struggled with the problem. It was wonderful for some of us as teachers because we didn't have to come in until 11 o'clock in the morning and leave at 6 o'clock at night. It was terrible for the parents. They had students in the first grade and third grade, and they had students in the middle school and high school, and it was terrible for them. We took 8 years before we built the middle school. We changed districts. Ellie, you probably have a better history of that than I do. At that time, I think Fremont was not part of our district in the high school.
They've been in and out 3 times over the last 40 years, so.
Okay. Well, anyway, during that time, I just wanted to say, we explored, the teachers, the faculty, the school board, explored the difference between a junior high school and a middle school. The concepts are very different. And when we were exploring it, I'm gonna have to use my notes, we decided to go with a middle school because it had a much broader scope. It included working with the children emotionally, giving them emotional, social, and organizational support, as well as reinforcing the concepts the students learned in elementary school. We did not want to go with the junior high concept, which was primarily preparing them for high school, because we felt that we needed to teach the whole child. The teachers in our community ended up taking courses from Education by Design so that we could teach the whole child. This was very successful, but it seems as though in the last 10 years we were the middle school, the middle child, and I think a lot of attention was paid to the building of this new school, and some things in the middle school got neglected. I know my time's running up, so I'm not going to say everything I had planned to say. I do want to point out to our board that I just finished doing the NAEP testing in the Seacoast area, and that was not one of the tests that was mentioned up here. But the Baker School and the middle school, and I believe the high school, also participated in the NAEP test, which is the nation's report card test. And New Hampshire does fairly well on that, and that was not brought up here. I'm concerned about accreditation for the middle school, which we ended up having all 4 schools accredited. And I'm concerned about it going into disarray and need of repair. So I urge the school board and our superintendent, please keep the middle school concept. Please keep the middle school students separate. I noticed that their behavior greatly improved when we left them, took them away from the high school students when we went down to the middle school. So good luck. I thank you all for all the hard work you've done, but please don't rush into it. It's too valuable to our community.
My name is Danielle Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N. I'm from Kingston. I have 3 kids at Bakey. I have a 4th grader, 2nd grader, and a preschooler. They are run-of-the-mill students, but they do have some needs. We came to the school with my daughter entering kindergarten, my son preschool. She was going to need services, wasn't sure what it was going to be. My son was in desperate need of services that Mass was really hard-pressed to give him. In fact, you couldn't understand what he said. I came to Bakey ready to fight because that's what you do in Massachusetts. When you have middle ground students, students with needs, but not severe needs or severe enough for Mass. I was welcomed with open arms with Bakey. They took everything that I had and they said, we'll redo it and we'll see where we're at. They provided my daughter with early intervention before needing an IEP. They had suggested that to me. They recognized the issues, and I couldn't have been happier. I couldn't be happier with Bakey. They provide the intervention prior to needing IEPs. The classroom sizes are 14 to 18 with paraprofessionals in almost all of the classes who provide your interventionist jobs, and they do a really spectacular job. And that's in smaller classroom sizes. I think that I would ask that we put this on hold until we figure out the logistics. I'm not against change. I think change is good. I think wanting our children to do well in school is good. I question statistics based on test scores because I know that all 3 of my children would probably not do well on test scores. My 4th grader opts out of a lot of the testing because of her emotional needs. So it's really hard to get a full picture of the full student body from those statistics and what their abilities are. I question what one teacher and one interventionist can do in a classroom full of 18 plus students, never mind counting who might move in. Because being a substitute at both Memorial and Bakey with students from 14 to 18 in a classroom, it's hard as a sub with a para who's pretty much telling me what I need to do. And never mind what a teacher needs to do. So I think that we're rushing things. I think that students don't learn well with higher class numbers. And I think that these transitions will be very difficult to deal with for our students. And like I said, I don't mind change. I don't mind it happening, but I feel like what you want to happen is already happening at least Bakey. I've seen some of it at Memorial, but not without the funding and not without the official staff. Paras who are there for the children that they need to help, they are doing an excellent job with, but they're also helping the other students in the class. So why not provide the help with those smaller class sizes? With larger class sizes, my 2 oldest would get lost in the mix. My youngest will run the world someday, so I really can't worry about that. They might need help with her, but I'm concerned that this is too fast. And I'm concerned that we don't have everything in place to guarantee that all of these services and all of the things you want to help deal with test scores and reading levels taken care of. And on a last note, I would respectfully disagree that as a school board, intervention should be the top priority.
Hi, my name is Roger Soucy, S-O-U-C-Y.
resident of Kingston. Have a kindergartner at Bakey and a third grader at Bakey. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the members of the board and superintendent for all your work, and also acknowledge the speakers that have been up before me and everyone else who is here tonight. Some of the concerns that I have as a parent and a member of this community, I'll start with a lot of the problems that we've encountered as a family have been with exposure to older students on the bus. And granted, I have a third grader that's going to elementary school, but still, nonetheless, we see that influence from older students and the desire for younger children to hang out with the older kids prevails, regardless of what we as parents and members in the community of authority try to do. In addition, I also have concerns over the potential increase in classroom size, and that would roughly be about a 30% increase if we're going from approximately 13 to 18, 19 students in elementary school classes. What that would do to the quality of education they get, and whether or not that is outweighed by adding intervention teacher, or whether that just treads water, so to speak. So those are some of my concerns. I'd like to confess that I'm not very well educated on property ownership and management in public education. So with that, I'm going to throw out a question that does not necessarily have to be answered, but who owns the middle school is the question. I do know that as a taxpayer, my money helps go to maintain the schools, but I'm not clear on who actually owns the property or the building itself. With the information that's been given to us, we have immediate repairs of $971,000, $671 for necessary repairs, totaling $1.6 million. Whoever owns the school or is the steward of that school is responsible to make sure that things do not fall into a state of disrepair to the tune of $1.6 million. As an investor in the public education system in this community, I'm upset to see that that has happened. I'm not somebody who wants to be part of an organization or a community that invests in dilapidated real estate and collects it like old cars rusting in the backyard. I would like to know and feel comfortable that the people that we have elected are making the right decisions to maintain the investments we have made as a community in our education, in the facilities and grounds, so that moving forwards, we do not continue to collect real estate in buildings whose sole purpose are for education and are very unlikely to be used or rented to people other than for other needs than that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
That means
we have 3 people here, and you asked me to see something about 8:45. That was the target. Great. Continue with.
Up to you. You're the chair. Well, okay. I think it's important. Okay. Hold on a second. I think we've agreed that if you already spoke, you get one. So I think this.
The lady here has not spoken yet.
Right. Yeah.
And those 3 there.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got two there.
Right.
Yeah. And
1, 2.
Yeah, under there, 4.
Am I good to go? My name is Christine Cowden, Cowden. I am from Kingston. I have 2 kids in Bakey. I think that my biggest thing here, I'm not a teacher, I don't have this big educational background, but I started coming to the meetings back when the talk was all about how we have no money to fix the middle school. We have no money to fix the middle school. And then I had this Rip Van Winkle moment, and I woke up, Article 8 was passed, and now suddenly the whole focus is on intervention. And we only have one option now because we need to have intervention. And I don't understand where the option of bringing 6th grade into the 2 individual schools just disappeared. I really would like to see what it looks like having the intervention that we're talking about that's so desperately needed brought to those schools, and what the financial implications are. Is it because we might have to add a modular school to one of them? I come from a community where we had a modular school. We actually thought it was awesome. I just feel like I'm not opposed to change, but I'm opposed to our options just disappearing. Maybe I've missed a whole bunch of things. I don't feel like I have. I try to stay pretty up on top of things, but as soon as Article 8 passed, I feel like all of a sudden all we had was to break it up with the 2 different schools up to 3rd and then move them up that way. I don't think I've seen anything that gives any kind of financial implications of what a functional interventional situation would look like in the current school models, bringing in the 6th grade. And now we have to vote on it in like a few days, it feels like. But I feel like, again, we're kind of being railroaded into only voting on one thing, and that it's kind of all the wording and all the literature that's come out. I feel like it's just driving us towards that one thing, and I don't know where all the other options went. So I know that I've talked to other people, and they feel kind of the same way. So I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but I guess the question is, where did the other options go?
I'll be brief. The other options, the 3 options that are on the table right now are to do nothing and fund the intervention, which costs, as I said earlier, $1.5 million, and that's for the staff. That's for 8 teachers and 16 paraprofessionals. The second option is to move 7th and 8th grade to the high school facility and move 6th grade to Bakey and 6th grade to Memorial, and that does not fund the intervention program because there's not enough savings. And then the third option is to reorganize the district into K through 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to 12. And that's the option that everyone's asking all the questions about. So the literature that's gone home is answering the questions that the community have. It's not trying to sway it one way or the other. It's just saying these are the answers to your questions. People aren't asking questions about the first option because they already know what it is. It's $1.5 million and plus 1.6 for the capital improvements to the building, and plus people keep forgetting that it's certainly fine that I'm very happy to say that the teachers' contracts were ratified, which is another $500,000 a year. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that, you know, if I had my dream world, we'd build a brand new K-8 building that had a K2 wing, a 3, 4, 5 wing, and a 6, 7, 8 wing with one administration and one kitchen and one, you know, it's like, but we're not going to close Memorial and Bakey when they're nice schools that are in a modern state. They're not in disrepair. So I want everyone to know that there are 3 options that the board needs to look at, and they need to choose. They need to decide what they're going to do. They haven't gone away. It's just that all the questions have been about the third option.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Joanne Corvo. I have 2 children right now in Newton. I know that my opinion is not a popular one, but I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to my child and other children in the district if you do not hear the other side of the coin. We have all of our eggs in one basket, interventionist, and there is no one in this room that can deny that they are a vital tool in any school district success. But it is not the only tool. They are not the superhero that you are giving them credit for. But instead, this is the platform, this is your lamb, and I feel like you are sacrificing the other kids in this community. My child scored in the 90th percentile for both math and reading. When she transitioned to Memorial, she could not even spit out basic sight words that she has known since she was 4. This plan negatively affects her and everyone like her. 1 in 20 children have diagnosed anxiety. This plan fails her. My nephew is beautiful and bright. He is on the autistic spectrum. Change paralyzes him. This plan fails him. And the 15% of our country that is on the autistic spectrum. So I can't just sit by and let this go without you hearing my opinion too. Do you know that this model that we are putting forth is the exact opposite of every research that is currently out there? Mr. Ambrose just spoke of a K-8 model, and because of the trials, the tribulations, and vulnerability of our middle schoolers, they are recommending that. And I can understand as a district why we cannot do that, but why are we going in the exact opposite direction without even looking twice? I have to say that just because parents don't agree with this tunnel vision, and it's not because we are not involved. I go to every single meeting. I have read your slides twice. I have looked at every questionnaire, but I have no confidence that this is going to help my child and many children in the school district like her. Thank you.
How you doing? My name's Dave Hardy from Newton. I moved here in 2014. All the kids in the neighborhood I've seen, it's only been 5 years, but kids grow fast. I watched them grow up through the school system. I was very impressed with how they developed, as people, as kids. All very respectful kids, which, they learn from their peers and the school system and stuff. But not only was I satisfied with seeing that, they were too. I asked them, how do you guys feel about the schools in Newton? They're all very satisfied with it. They're all, the kids, they don't really want to talk too much about it, but they all gave me a thumbs up on how things are currently. I grew up in the Salem School District, which was huge. I really wasn't a fan of it. I always felt like you were fighting with other people to get either attention or to get extra help with stuff that you didn't maybe get in class, which that falls in the intervention stuff. But the smaller school district in Newton, it kind of was a turn on for me when I moved here. From what I'm hearing tonight, those kids in the audience that were speaking up, they're telling me that their peers are not feeling it. If the kids aren't comfortable with it, I feel like they're not gonna want to do well with it because they already don't want it. They're not interested in it. So when kids are not interested in something, they're turned off. The high school, I just learned that it was 12 years ago. It was done. It was built, and struggling now, utilizing the space. So talking about revamping the middle school, it was at $1.5 million to do that. So that's a ton of money just to drop into that. So could that put you, well, not you, but could that put us in a situation where that school is now, okay, we have this awesome middle school, and now what are we gonna do with it? So, it would be nice to have 2 new schools, but so yeah, I don't know. The grass isn't always greener with changes. Sometimes just watering your own lawn's best. So maybe we could slowly take on the work for the middle school and not do it all at once. And maybe some of that cost, slide that into the intervention costs to the individual schools. And what would the cost be to, if you merge the schools and have the intervention, what was that number? Do we have that roughly?
I'm sorry
if you merge merging the schools with the proposed change.
I'm not looking at the slides, but the savings in year 2 was actually a savings of $430,000 roughly.
Okay.
Per year.
Yeah, because the tax savings, that's negligible.
Right, but if you add the $430,000 to the $1.5 million for intervention plus the teachers' contracts that would need to be funded, it's the student that shared is a very astute student, and I met with him, and he is right on that it's about $100 per home per $300,000. And so if you take $3.5 million and divide that by that amount, you're looking at almost $1,000 a year per home.
Okay.
So this isn't small money. It isn't, it's a lot of money. What's that? Was something wrong? Oh, really? Okay. Can you go ahead? So $3 million divided by $300,000 is how much? 3 million divided by 300,000. No, I'm not. I'm trying to clarify. Well, I do, and I'm telling you that it's almost $1,000 a home if you just paid for it without, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just want you to know the facts. $3 million divided by $300,000 is 10 times $100 per $300,000 is $1,000, and I'm looking at the VA. That's correct, right? Yeah. He's the numbers guy. Yeah. I don't say things without thinking about them.
Yeah. Sure.
I have a spreadsheet that calculates the tax rate based upon the latest information from both of the towns. If anyone wants to run any of the numbers, I have it right here. $3 million is about $1,000 to Newton and about $600 to Kingston. No. This is if you were to fund the intervention and maintain the schools the way they are, and also do construction at the middle school.
So do you have a last question?
So with that, so basically, everything would stay how it is. It would cost each household, as a summary, it would cost each household $1,000 more a year, and no one gets inconvenienced and whatever, like no changes in people's lives. Is that what I'm gathering?
You're talking about estimates, and I do want to
Exactly.
acknowledge that estimates are not, but if we add, for every time we add $300,000 to the budget, we're adding $100 per home in Newton and about 60 some odd dollars in Kingston.
Mm-hmm.
So if you splay that out to 3 million, which is 1.5 million for intervention and another 1.5 million in renovations, in year one alone it would be $1,000. But there are costs that you have to remember. We also have a 3% increase in CPI annually, which is another $900,000 that typically goes into the budget just for the default budget.
But that would keep the middle school. That would keep the middle school up and running, utilized by the residents in the towns.
I think that it would be. It's very. I mean, we're at the end of this process tonight. But if you would like to sit down and go through more direct numbers, I would be happy to do that. But I would say the rule of thumb is that per $300,000, it's $100 per home in Newton and $60 in Kingston.
Okay.
So if you roll that out to all the different costs, it's a lot of money.
All right.
Did that help? I just thought
Yeah,
it's a very complicated thing to
I
explain.
mean, I'm just like, because I kind of went from the larger town to the smaller. I kind of shrunk, and like, so I'm relating that to, Salem had Wyndham joining them, and now Wyndham's out of there. So like, I feel like they did it like backwards, and like from what's going on here. But I'm just trying to, play the cards out and help everyone understand as well as myself. So thank you very much. I appreciate all your time.
Yeah.
It's just a real quick point. Just a real quick point. I'm trying to find the other side of that, Mr. Ambrose. I'm trying to find, you're going to tell us what it's going to cost us in tax money additionally on our homes if we don't do this, but I don't see where we're getting it back when we do it. So where do we see the $2 million or $3 million coming back if by splitting up the schools? I don't see that.
I'm happy to help you, but I'm happy to help you, but have you read all the documents that have been presented front and back?
I believe so.
You read the 6 pages of question and answer, because all of that information is in the slides and in the Q&As.
Okay, then I will.
If when you read them, please call me. I'm happy to meet with you. Right? I'm happy to explain further.
Well, I've got to go back to Karen's point too, Karen Campbell. When we initially started this, my understanding was the problem was that there aren't enough students for the number of buildings we have.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
And the cost. Now tonight we're talking about specifically student success. We're not talking at all about buildings and schools and people, and it's all about the need for paraprofessionals.
Well, this is the last thing I'll say about this because I feel like we're going around in circles at this point. We've already covered all that about the buildings and the student enrollments and the 5 campuses. I was simply responding in my presentation to the additional questions that were asked to further clarify based on feedback from the community. So nothing that we said before is gone. I just didn't feel like we needed to go over it again.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jackie Clark. I'm a resident of Kingston. I have a daughter who's in 7th grade at the middle school and a son who's in 5th grade at Bakey. I didn't prepare anything to speak tonight, but I do feel as though there's one thing that hasn't been addressed, and that's our teachers and our staff. I've done some digging myself and asked some questions to teachers whom I trust and love and who have supported both of my kids in their academic achievements. And it seems to me that there's a common thread that they're afraid to speak up, that they're afraid to voice their concerns, that they want to help students, but already know based on the undertones of our conversation here that there just is not enough intervention for them. I personally have had teachers stay after school and tutor my children. I have one who has earned himself a seat in the enrichment program, and I have one who has an IEP for dyslexia. This is not the first time I've stood at this podium and talked about intervention and the need for more support for students. So I charge the board, as well as the budget committee, although I know they're not here tonight to represent themselves, to spend more time with our teaching staff and ask them questions about what they see on the ground. I commend Mr. Ambrose for taking the time that he has taken to meet one-on-one with small groups of staff and teachers and ask their opinion. But with all due respect, to share your opinion with your boss's boss is intimidating. This board serves a position where they become a little bit more of a neutral party. And I feel that there should be more open dialogue amongst our teaching staff and our board members and our budget committee about what really needs to take place in all of our schools, no matter where our students are housed. Bakey School is about to lose, and I'm gonna try not to fall apart, a very valuable staff member who serves a huge role as being an advocate for students who need 504s and IEPs. This is a really big deal that's not being discussed. Who's going to replace and fill that role with the same level of expertise, with the same lack of intervention? Mountains are moved at the Bakey School, and I can't speak for Memorial, but students are getting needs met with very little resources. And I just want to be clear that regardless of any shifts that happen with our classrooms and where they're located, Bakey has a huge undertaking on its hands. And I want the board to know how important it is, no matter what the budget does, that intervention needs to be assessed personally by each one of you. And staff needs to be asked very pertinent questions and not just by Mr. Ambrose. So I hope you'll take some time to meet with teachers and building administrators and the paraprofessionals that we do have and really focus on what those needs are and hear them personally from them.
Expect from the way things have been conducted that there'll be continued discussions.
believe so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd.
I'm gonna go right to other business, if that's all right with the board. Okay, the next meeting, and that's is, the next meeting agenda now, there's gonna be a joint, could you, okay, it's gonna be a joint Fremont's, all right, we're gonna let them go first.
Yeah.
June 5th. There is a joint meeting with Fremont on Tuesday, the 20,
June the
May
21st,
21st.
at the Ellis School.
At the Ellis School. But that's primarily their agenda, so we're not going to be discussing any of this.
Yeah. They
at that
set the
meeting.
agenda when we go over there, we set the agenda when they come over here.
Yeah,
We do it twice a year. Okay, I'm
Going
sorry.
to meet with Fremont next Tuesday, May 21st at the Ellis School.
I'm gonna say that loudly when things quiet down. While they're doing that, Larry, can I have a motion for Jim? Where'd you go?
Jim's going to the bathroom.
Okay, we gotta wait till Jim because there has to be roll call.
Non-public.
Non-public. We do it a short one. Okay, here we go. It should be a joint Fremont Sanborn School Board meeting Tuesday, the 21st. That's next Tuesday at 6 p.m. at the Ellis School. The next Sanborn Regional School Board meeting will be held on Wednesday, June 5th, 2019, starting at 6 o'clock, ending approximately 9, in the library, Sanborn Regional High School. And I'm going to take a few minutes. Everybody else needs to clear out because we're going to go into non-public, and then I will have Larry, who does so good at making the motion.
Okay.